What's up, folks? It's me once again, Josh. You're gonna call me Josh. Joshua City Brewer, last name. You got it? But I'm back here to talk some boxing, of course. It can get lonely in the world of streaming, but I appreciate everyone who drops by to check it out. You understand? Now, yesterday we had a pretty solid discussion. If you're listening to this channel for the first time, then that won't be relevant to you. But we were discussing some of the great welterweights in the world. It just so happens on this particular day and yesterday we had a press conference for Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford, which ties to one of the biggest welterweight fights in the history of the sport. Now, check that video out. It's out there. You'll see it on the channel. That said, here tonight, we're going to switch it up a little bit. It's a little bit different right now. We're going to talk about a couple of other boxers. Let me make a little adjustment right here on my lighting. But we were going to talk about a couple of other boxers, without a doubt. And shout out to all the people who drop in. Shout out to Andre Rodriguez. What's going on, buddy? Appreciate you, Andre. He says, good evening, Joshua. Good evening to you, Andre. Yeah, I appreciate having you here, man. It's all good. It's all good. Let me get this lighting right here. Let me get this right. 2 days in a row for me right here. That's not a normal thing. I'm trying to keep it up. Salute to Boz, a.k.a. Slavin. What's going on with your Boz? If you know Boz, go check him out. If you don't know Boz, go check him out. And be sure to check out Boxing Chit. Every Sunday, we bring it, usually between like 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern time, somewhere in there. We'll make adjustments here and there, but appreciate everyone being in here, of course. Bob says hello there. Rodolfo Rivera Jr. What's going on, Rodolfo? He says 86. Appreciate you, Rodolfo, without a doubt. As always, it's always great chatting with you, Rodolfo. A lot of good things. Everyone get that young man a follow. He's doing his thing out there. Cali representing, baby. I'm with you. Without a doubt. Marky Dan, 123. Cool. Thank you, Marky Dan. Appreciate you dropping in. Marky Dan says, I love the sweet science. This is a cool topic. Indeed. It is a very cool topic. If you don't know, which I'm sure all of you probably know at this particular point, today we're going to switch it up a little bit and talk about Jack Dempsey, but not just a single Jack Dempsey, 2 Jack Dempseys, because there are 2 great Jack Dempseys that were fighters out there. Now, as far as everything known, there's no real relation whatsoever outside of the name being the same. That being said, there are 2 great Jack Dempsey. So thank you, Marky Dan, for dropping in because, hey, I want you to be a part of the discussion. What's going on, Martin? Martin, I know we were just chatting in the comments. Good stuff, man. 86 dropping by briefly to say hi. I hope you're good. Hello to all in the chat. Hello to you as well, Martin. Hey, always love you dropping in, Martin. Good stuff, man. Always leaving good comments, all that, good dialogue. So appreciate having you here, without a doubt. Blake Gallimore says, good evening. Good evening to you, Blake. Welcome. Appreciate chatting with you as well, Blake, providing some great insight. I've seen your stuff on the comments and all that good stuff. And I appreciate it. Always love the dialogue any way we can get it. It's just one of those things. So appreciate talking about the history of the sport, all that goes on in that regard. So thank you to all. This is like a tight-knit group of boxing guys who love the history of the sport and want to continue to push that forward, along with the modern stuff as well. It's just one of those things that keeps bringing us back. The sport in itself always brings us back, regardless of many of the sort of death threats to the sport of boxing. It always seems to hang around. You get a tight-knit group, small world, really, when it comes to boxing, very small world. You always don't have, a ton of people surrounding you or friends and colleagues, etc., who are really deep into the sport, or at least that's been my experience. So therefore, I appreciate all of my online compadres who I get to chat with and have good discussions on the sport of boxing with. So Boz says, and the reason is only one of them was really called Jack Dempsey. Without a doubt, we can start it there. Only one of them was really called Jack Dempsey, and that was William Dempsey. You know what I'm saying? And that person right there is the original, or no, that's the second coming of Jack Dempsey, but he was the original Jack Dempsey by name. and that is the one that everyone knows, one of the most popular boxers in the world, and you know him as the Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey. So he is probably the more famous Dempsey of the bunch. That's William Harrison Jack Dempsey. So William Harrison Jack Dempsey. If there was a misconception out there, I don't know that there is or that there was in relation to whether or not Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler, who is arguably the most popular boxer in the sport's history, got his name from the other Jack Dempsey, what we often refer to as the original Jack Dempsey. No, that was not the case. He just so happened to be William Harrison Dempsey, and they called him Jack. Now, the other Dempsey, his surname is Kelly, John Edward Kelly, and he's of Irish descent, born on December 15th, 1862 in Ireland. So that's the difference. The Jack Dempsey that we know or more commonly associate with was born in 1895 in Manasseh, Colorado. So that's where the difference lies right there. One of them is Irish, one of them is American. And yeah, that's kind of the separator there for them in terms of their original heritage and what's tied to that piece of their life or whatever. So real quick, I do have a video that is out there. I call it Same Name Jack Dempsey's or something like that. I might have changed the title as a matter of fact, but I do have a video. It's not a long video, but it is a video where it compares the two Dempseys because let's face it, no question about it, that many people don't know about the original Jack Dempsey because of the fact that he's overshadowed by the Manasseh Mauler, and that's understandably so. I mean, once you reach the heights that the Manasseh Mauler was able to reach as a boxer, then it's kind of hard for anyone to overshadow that. You only have those super mega stars that can even live up to that level in actuality. So understandably, if you're looking or searching for Jack Dempsey, I'd imagine if you put it into Google, all of that stuff, you're naturally going to get William Harrison Dempsey, which is the Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey from Colorado. I think it's just one of those things, when you are able to reach the heights that he was able to reach. I mean, there's really not a ton that you can do about that other than continue to try and get the story out there of the other Jack Dempsey, one of the great nicknames in boxing, Nonpareil. So that's what we usually use to separate the two. Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, and then, the other Jack Dempsey, the Jack Dempsey that we all know. Nonpareil meaning unrivaled. And that came about because of the fact that during his time, he was considered to be unbeatable. And I guess you can say understandably so, because he was able to put up a hell of a run during his time in the sport of boxing. Real quick, Marky Dan says, I just watched Battle in Siki versus George Carpentier, wild era. Without a doubt, wild era right there. That's a very interesting fight right there, Marky Dan. That is a very interesting fight. Battle in Siki, the Senegalese former world light heavyweight champion. He, of course, picked up the title by defeating George Carpentier, the Orchid Man, who represented France, from France, all that good stuff. One of the big punchers in the sport's history. He was able to do a lot of good things in the sport. He was also a referee, all of that good stuff. And really, he was a big time kind of popular guy in the sport at his time as well. And, he has that connection with Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler, because of the fact that the two of them fought. But yeah, that was a very good, very interesting fight right there between Carpentier and Battling Siki. As a matter of fact, I put out a short on that not too long ago, Marky Dan. I don't know if that's what you saw, or you probably saw the fight in itself. But anyway, it was very interesting there at the tail end, because if you look at it in slow motion, it looked as though Battling Siki may have kind of threw a knee or something and kind of caught Carpentier while he was going down, or he slung down. Now, that being said, Carpentier, which, he's probably commonly associated with being a gentleman of the sport, he was doing a lot of dirty stuff in the midst of that fight. He was headbutting Battling Siki, and you name it, the nine, I think it was low blowing, all that stuff. So Siki was just kind of reacting to what he was being given. But anyway, the call was initially listed as I believe a disqualification, but it was eventually reversed by, I want to say it's like the president or commission over there in France, from an athletic standpoint. Someone who had enough of the juice to be able to make a call of that nature ended up reversing it. So Battling Siki became the first African world champion, and that was big time right there. And of course, Battling Siki, we've talked about it on the Boxing Shit podcast. He had an unfortunate end, interestingly enough, and yeah, it's kind of sad. So it was short lived as far as his championship, because I believe it was a few months later he was stripped of the title or something of that nature. So he didn't really get to live it up to per se as far as being the champion. But he lived this life. I think he was out when he got actually killed. I think he was murdered, shot. Someone had mentioned such. I knew it was a tragic type of death, but certainly unfortunate. And of course, we have plenty of those stories in the sport of boxing. I mean, it's just the nature of the sport. And I guess you can say it's in any sport, but certainly in the sport of boxing, just given what you deal with just overall in that sport. So Martin Dunstan says, middleweight world champion Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Yes, indeed, Martin. I mean, one of the great fighters of his era. As a matter of fact, what I've read was that at his peak, this being Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, he was on par popularity-wise with John L. Sullivan, who essentially came to in a similar fashion during that particular time. Their careers ran kind of parallel, not exactly parallel, but almost parallel. And of course, we know that John L. Sullivan was the world heavyweight champion, the first recognized world heavyweight champion. I have a video that was released on him not too long ago, just kind of diving into some of the fights that didn't take place with John L. Sullivan, and therefore why he wasn't the undisputed world heavyweight champion at that particular time. But that being said, he was the world heavyweight champion nonetheless, the first recognized one. So the Manasseh Mauler, or rather the Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, he was actually on par popularity-wise. If Sullivan was considered number one, then at his peak, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey was number two. He garnered a lot of fans, and he did so because he was one of those boxers who showed a finesse to him, showed a level of skill to him, and many, like I said, thought that he was a guy that you couldn't beat. And realistically, a lot of his fights, he actually ended up fighting in skin-tight gloves. It was a mix of Marcus of Queensberry, but some of it kind of tied to the London prize ring type of rules. In actuality, it's you never know with guys in whomever was fighting during those particular times. The rules could be bit in varying ways, but oftentimes skin-tight gloves is what Nonpareil Jack Dempsey was fighting with and was fighting in. And when you're in those type of situations, of course, it changes how you throw punches, because you don't really have that cushion there to protect you from breaking your hand or anything of that nature. And therefore, that's why you saw a lot of the fights drag out a bit longer, because every punch counted and every punch needed to land in the right fashion in order for it to be, in order for fighters to prevent themselves from being hurt by throwing those punches, in the wrong type of fashion. And, when you don't really have that protection, that's something you always have to worry about. We don't think about it today because there's sort of mandates, and it's mandatory that, gloves have a certain amount of padding within them. You see some in the lower ounce category. I think on the MMA side, it's about 4 ounces. So yeah, just think about that. Think about fighting in gloves that are less than the MMA gloves. And you got to imagine that can be damaging for the hands right there. Boz says, how's Jack Dempsey overrated? You're asking me that, Boz? You asking me how Jack Dempsey was overrated? Let me see. But I will say Jack Dempsey, depending on which one you're talking about, but the Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey, of course, we know he was one of the world heavyweight champions and one of the most popular, without a doubt. Now, there were some fights that did not take place that would have likely cemented his legacy in more of in more of an established fashion when it comes to the actual competition. Thinking about it from that standpoint, his legacy, of course, his legacy reigns true. I mean, he is a big time fighter and all that stuff. But that being said, there were some fights he didn't have, and therefore, when you look at his resume, his heavyweight resume as a fighter and as one of the all-time greats, there are other fighters out there who had deeper careers, especially if you're comparing their championship runs for those that became world champions to Jack Dempsey. So in that sense, yeah, there can be an argument can certainly be made that he was overrated in that sense, or as it relates to his overall legacy in ring as champion and what he was able to do while he was world champion. Now, I'm a big fan of the Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey. No doubt about it. If you look on the 86 Boxing page, you will see a number of videos on him. That being said, I cannot cloud my own judgment or the judgment of others and assume that or make the declaration that he is the greatest heavyweight of all time. No, I will not say that he is that. He was a very good heavyweight. And as a matter of fact, the version of him from 1919, the version that we saw defeat Jess Willard and actually just destroy Jess Willard. And if you haven't heard me say it before, I'll say it again. That is one of the fights that got me into the history of the sport. That might be the fight in itself when I actually saw that and saw what Dempsey was able to do in that patented Dempsey roll and just destroy such a larger man in Jess Willard. Man, I just wanted to dive more into the history of the sport from that point forward. But of course, that version of Dempsey was probably the best version of Dempsey. And we saw a little bit of that in his next couple of fights. Carpentier had no chance when they fought realistically. And then the big punching Luis Angel Firpo, hey, he paid for an excellent fight, a hell of a fight that the two of them put on. So those are probably his peak performances, along with his win over Fred Fulton, which took place, I want to say it was 1917. It might have been 1917 or 1918, one of the two, but I think it was 1918 when Harry Wills actually knocked out Fred Fulton, who was another potential rival of Jack Dempsey. And that's a big piece of Jack Dempsey's history because the two of them should have fought. Blake Gilmore says he was popular because of Doc Kearns. Kudos for doing what he did in the sport, but he was really a one-dimensional fighter. He looked horrible when fighting guys who could move and box like Tony Gibbons. He was the early century hype job. Hey, there it is right there. There it is. Blake Gallimore has his opinion, no doubt about it. Blake, I know you've shared that before. What I will say certainly is that, yeah, Doc Kearns certainly played a role in, as far as the fights that didn't happen. Doc Kearns had a big part in that. He did not want Dempsey to take on the likes of Harry Wills. I've ran across articles that quoted him specifically saying such. Tex Rickard, he didn't want the fight to happen at one point. There were a lot of delaying tactics that went into place that therefore didn't allow for the Harry Wills fight to take place. Now, eventually they signed at some point, and there's this notion that the check bounced and Dempsey said, "The hell with it," and the fight didn't happen. I don't know. I couldn't substantiate that claim right there. That is a very popular claim that's out there. And maybe it's true. If someone can link me to some type of article or resource that actually says that or that can quote that specifically and has details on it, please do. But I personally wasn't able to find anything that said Dempsey pulled out of the Harry Wills fight because of a check bouncing. Now, what I do know is there was $200,000 on the table, and there was a promoter who had that money available. And in one of the videos that I've done on Dempsey, maybe more than him, I even list his name and I linked the article that even ties back to it. And the deal was Dempsey would get $150,000 and Harry Wills would get $50,000. So I know at least from a financial standpoint, $200,000 was available, and that would have been, big time at that particular point in history when you factor in inflation and all of that stuff. So I don't know of a check bouncing situation as mentioned in some of the documentaries and things that I've seen, but hey, maybe it did happen. I don't know of it. But that fight with Will certainly should have happened, and it didn't. And, the rest is history, I guess you can say. Andre Rodriguez says there's a great story behind that fight, and after the countdown too. Okay, good stuff. Andre Rodriguez. Let me see. Martin, salute from Boz. Blake Gilmore. He only looked good versus big, slow guys who didn't move and just stood and took a beating, such as Bill Brennan, Fred Fulton, Carl Morris, Willard. Again, when he faced guys who could box, he got beat or looked horrible. Facts. All right, Blake Gilmore. Hey, coming with it. Yeah, hey, appreciate you, Blake. Hey, you know what? Yeah, Bill Brennan, tough guy who was really, I guess you can say, kind of a contender during that time frame, who really didn't get, or he had some good moments, I guess you can say. He was in with a lot of top level competition, but not one of those guys who you would consider like that world championship type level guy. Now, I have a video on the great Fred Fulton. He was one of the big time punchers from that period, about 6'5", somewhere in that range, 6'5", some say 6'6", some may say 6'4". But that being said, big time puncher during that period. And he had a couple of high level runs where he was just knocking out guys left and right. And Fulton ended up being stopped by Dempsey in only around seconds. I know it's seconds, maybe 18 seconds. I don't know, maybe less than that, somewhere in that time frame. Carl Morris, another big guy. Willard, yeah, definitely. We know Jess Willard, big guy who wasn't fundamentally sound in that sense, but he's tough and had endurance. So, yeah, hey, Dempsey did look good against those guys, no doubt about it. Dempsey, I know he was knocked out, or at least reported to be knocked out, and I think it was true in some sense, by Fireman Jim Flynn, who was one of those tough and rugged guys from that particular time. Now, one of the fighters that Dempsey did fight, I know, of course, and got a win over, is John Lester Johnson. That was a black fighter from that time who was more of a, I guess you can say, smaller heavyweight in terms of weight, size comparison. But that being said, he was a tough fighter from that time who was very decent for sure. Boz says, Blake Gallimore, he did beat Carpentier. Yes, he did. Carpentier, one of the great light heavyweights, but certainly nothing to snuff at from a heavyweight perspective. Not a real heavyweight. So, yeah, Dempsey did handle Carpentier, and he handled him fairly easy, to be honest with you. And Carpentier, hey, great guy, or a great boxer, did a lot of good things at light heavyweight, but certainly not a heavyweight, without a doubt. Not a heavyweight. Blake Gallimore says, yes, but he looked horrible doing it and was 15 pounds heavier. Well, the story is that he let it go for a little bit, but certainly I guess you can make a case that, it could be either way. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But when that time came, he took him out of there, and he got him out there, got Carpentier out of there and handled his business. I mean, that's the way it goes down. Bob says, I wouldn't say horrible. Yeah, I wouldn't say horrible either. Had some moments there in the beginning, but certainly Carpentier is one of those guys that, Dempsey should have been able to handle and take out, given the advantage he's had in size. Flat Boxing, salute to you, Flat Boxing. What's going on, buddy? Appreciate you being here. Flat Boxing, shout out to Flat Boxing. Everyone, check him out. Appreciate your Flat, no doubt about it. Get to have some good comments and dialogue with you, without a doubt, on this channel as well. So I love it, without a doubt. Blake Gallimore says, most people just see him pounding on the statue Willard and think he was a killer. They don't read how he got slapped around 4 times by a blown-up veteran middleweight Willie Meehan 4 times. Well, no doubt about it. Hey, there's truth to that, without a doubt. Fat boy Willie Meehan, I believe he started somewhere, I may be wrong in saying flyweight, but he started at a very low weight for sure. Willie Meehan, he's one of those guys, you have to look him up. He had a lot of fights. He had a lot of fights against a lot of top-level competition. Using the rating system I had when I was, or at least previous version I was using, I had him at around like a 3.5-star fighter, somewhere in that mix. But that being said, Willie Meehan, he was one of those guys who blew up in weight, and he was able to give some people trouble. There are those who had his number, but Dempsey wasn't one of those individuals. Willie Meehan troubled the Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey. I want to say in their series, Meehan may have had 1 or 2 wins, along with about 2 or 3 draws, somewhere in that mix. I know that Willie Meehan got the better of Jack Dempsey in their series. I think they fought 5 times. And this is just me thinking from what I recall, just thinking off top, of course. And yeah, Willie Meehan did seem to have his number. So that shows you, of course, styles make fights. Willie Meehan, again, a smaller guy who blew up. And I don't know if he was flyweight or featherweight is where he started, but he started at a very low weight. And he was not one of these guys who was known to be a knockout artist or anything of that nature. He was just I guess, solid guy, solid sort of contender status type guy. But he was able to trouble Dempsey. And this is, Dempsey, while he was, I guess, in theory, coming into his prime. So I think that speaks volumes to a certain degree, at the very least. It certainly does. Blake Gallimore says Harry Wills and Harry Greb would have killed him, but he ducked him. Yeah, that is a big time thing. If you don't know the story, which I know many of you probably do know the story, that being said, I'll share it for those who don't. But essentially, Harry Wills, he was the guy at that particular time, and I think me myself personally, and I have there's a video of Harry Wills on the 86 Boxing channel. Definitely go check it out, and it touches on this Dempsey thing a bit more. But I would say between the years of probably 1918 to 1922, somewhere within that span, Harry Wills, I think he was the best heavyweight in the world, and that's including ranking Dempsey amongst them. Dempsey was the world heavyweight champion, of course, and he took the title from Jess Willard. But I think that the best heavyweight at that particular time was, without a doubt, Harry Wills, the Black Panther. He's one of those guys who never got a shot at a world title. But had he gotten a shot at that particular time, I think he would have beat whatever heavyweight would have had the championship. It doesn't matter if they would have changed hands by virtue of Sam Langford maybe having it or freaking Fred Fulton having it. It wouldn't have mattered, because I think Harry Wills was the best heavyweight during that period. Guy, he's about 6'2", a solidly built guy, broad shoulders. He could work from the inside and out, but he's definitely loved the uppercuts on the inside. That was like his trademark thing. And Harry Wills never got that shot at Jack Dempsey, and that would have been the biggest fight in boxing at that particular time. The demand was there, and you can read newspaper articles and accounts from the time. There was not anyone who thought that there was another heavyweight who would have challenged Dempsey more than Harry Wills. And there were many at that time who thought that Harry Wills was the best heavyweight in the world at that particular time. And I, too, side with that. And this being a Dempsey fan, I think if they would have fought, I think Harry Wills would have gave him major problems. Now, there are conceivable ways in which Dempsey could have won, but I definitely think that Harry Wills would have been victorious, especially while Harry Wills was in his prime. And he's a guy who fought Sam Langford, I want to say, in the neighborhood of 14, 15 times. And early in his career, when he was younger, Sam Langford got the better of him. But once he got to a certain point and Sam Langford was no longer in the absolute prime of his career, he couldn't touch Harry Wills in the sense of getting a victory over him or anything of that nature, because Harry Wills he just came to and just became this formidable force. So Harry Wills, as I say, and I'll mention again, I think between 1918 and 1922, Harry Wills was the best heavyweight in the world, and that version of him is one of the greatest heavyweights of all times, and he would have given anybody problems and challenges. So that didn't happen. Then, of course, we know Harry Greb, the great Pittsburgh windmill, former world middleweight champion, a guy with 200 plus, nearly 300 fights, probably realistically, thinking about the times and what we have reported and those unreported, he probably had that many fights anyway, well over that. But one of these great middleweights, and he continued to rise in weight. So he's a guy who wasn't a big guy. He didn't have punching power, but he would fight above his weight. And there was a sparring session, and I know there's the thing, like, sparring doesn't mean everything or whatever, but during a sparring session, Dempsey was used to kind of manhandling a lot of the guys that he would face in sparring. And Greb got in there one day, and Dempsey, yeah, he wasn't prepared for what Greb had to offer. And Greb, we know, is a guy who was known to throw punches from all angles, and he had a very unorthodox style, was fast. He moved in and out, jumping in with all types of punches, all that stuff. And supposedly he made Dempsey look bad in that particular sparring session. And from that point, Dempsey would not give him a shot at the world heavyweight title. And Greb was game and willing to do so. Put out an interview not too long ago where I quoted Greb specifically, where he said he was willing to take that fight. He was willing to jump in there. He didn't say that, oh, I will beat Dempsey or whatever, blah, blah, blah. He said that he felt strongly that he would have a good showing, and he did feel that, he did feel that he would beat Dempsey, but it wasn't like he was thinking that, okay, he'd go in there and knock him out or anything of that nature and just handle him easily. He gave Dempsey the respect, but he did feel that he would have beat Dempsey. And, Greb at that particular time, I mean, that would have been a tough challenge for Dempsey, who wasn't used to guys who would move and throw the amount of punches and at volume and pace in the way that Harry Greb was able to do so. There's not many boxers in history who was able to do that. Harry Greb, certainly one of the top boxers ever. If you think about it, some regard him as the greatest boxer ever, and I think he's deserving of that billing. Same with Sam Langford. You have others thrown in the mix: Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson, Henry Armstrong, etc. But some of those guys are just in rare territory, rarefied eras. And Harry Greb is one of those guys. And Dempsey apparently wanted no part of Harry Greb. And Harry Greb, much like the situation with the Harry Wills fight, Harry Greb had financial backing. The fight was able to be made. They could have done it in Pittsburgh. They would have had a stadium built specifically for that fight, but it never materialized. So it wasn't a money issue, without a doubt. Just as the Harry Wills fight, it wasn't a money issue. Don't let anyone tell you it was. It was not a money issue. It just didn't happen. And I don't give Dempsey all of the blame. It's partially on Doc Kearns as well as Tex Rickard. Now, Tex Rickard said he didn't want to do it because of the fact that there were race riots after the Johnson versus James J. Jeffries fight, of course, which would have had, that happened some years earlier there. But that being said, I mean, the fight could have happened just like any fight. Hey, if you want it, if you demand it, I know you have a promoter and all that stuff, you can make it happen. We're just now getting Crawford versus Spence, but we got Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder a while back. I mean, same groups. Tyson Fury was top ranked. Deontay Wilder was PBC. At the time, Crawford was top ranked and Errol Spence was PBC, but we got to fight now. But just goes to show you, if you really want it, you can certainly make it happen. Slavin says, though Blake called him overrated. Yeah. Rodolfo says, I think Vi's just trolling 86. No, I got you. Vi says, same as my old buddy Ryan Bivens, who used to say he wasn't even the best Jack Dempsey. Hey, an argument can be made there, if you really look at it and boil down things. I think an argument can be made that the greatest of the Jack Dempseys was, without a doubt, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, unrivaled Jack Dempsey. I have a video out there on him. I want to do something bigger, longer, and that touches on him a bit more. But this was a guy who was, I guess you could say, ahead of his time in some sense, a very scientific boxer. And I'll say this again because I always feel like I need to say this. Scientific boxing did not start with James J. Corbett. He's the guy that we see on video, and he's the guy who's credited with such. But scientific boxing did not start with the gentleman James Corbett. It was well before that. You had guys that were teaching the likes of Corbett. Professor Mike Donovan is someone I mentioned who was one of those guys who taught him varying things. And there was also another Mike Donovan who was an Irish fighter who took on that same namesake, but he learned under the tutelage of Professor Mike Donovan. And you had some of those guys who were in the bare knuckle world, and that's where Professor Mike Donovan got his trade, or at least started his trade for the most part. But he was one of those guys who was a scientific boxer. And so it didn't start with James Corbett. That's just what I really want to get across. But anyway, certainly one of those guys was, without a doubt, Jack Dempsey, Nonpareil, the guy who was considered unrivaled, took on some of the great middleweights of his time. I have a video out there on him. As I mentioned, there's a short out there on him that kind of dove into one of his fights in terms of these guys back then. The conditions were very different. That's why it makes it tough comparing fighters of today with guys back then. A rival of Dempsey's was a guy by the name of George LaBlanche. He was a Canadian fighter. He didn't have a ton of fights under the Marquess of Queensberry rules, but enough. He put in enough work and he could do enough damage. He was the first man to knock out Jack Dempsey, if I'm not mistaken, but it was supposedly with an illegal backhand or whatever. But I can only imagine the times were crazy at that particular time. And I do have a short out there on Jack Dempsey fighting in a contest where they actually switched locations. It's a multi-hour contest where they took a barge out to a location that was unspecified. Of course, boxing was illegal in a lot of places at that time. And the two started to fight, and the tide started to come in, so they relocated and resumed the fight at that new location, which is crazy. You wouldn't even think of something like that happening today, but that just shows you the type of conditions that those guys were going through at that particular time. So Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, man, he's one of the great fighters from that time. And if you don't know, you probably do. He actually died at 32, I believe it was 32 years of age. I want to say it was 1892 or somewhere around there, 1891, one of them. And he had tuberculosis. So tuberculosis has taken out a number of great fighters. That killed Joe Gans. And that was in the midst of Joe Gans' career as well. This was in the midst of Nonpareil Jack Dempsey's career. I think Jimmy Driscoll is another one who died of tuberculosis, but it was after his career. Old Chocolate George Godfrey, he died of tuberculosis a little bit after his career, though. But that being said, there are a number of fighters who succumbed to tuberculosis at that particular time in the midst of their career. Nonpareil Jack Dempsey was one of those at 32 years of age. So had that not happened, we actually might have video of Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. And the reason his career, or at least one of the reasons his career went on the slide, was because of tuberculosis, because he had multiple bouts with tuberculosis. It wasn't just a one-time occurrence. And he was still fighting. And in one of his final fights, of course, he got destroyed by Tommy Ryan, the great welterweight and middleweight champion and one of the greatest fighters in the sport's history, who has a resume that can stack up amongst the greats. But yeah, he destroyed Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, the first person I guess you can say who really gave it to Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. I guess why you can say he was in his prime in some sense is, of course, the great Bob Fitzsimmons. That's the man who took the middleweight title from Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Bob Fitzsimmons, we know, the first ever 3-division world champion in boxing, one of the biggest punchers in history, arguably the biggest puncher in history. So I guess you can say it kind of made sense right there, because we know how Bob gets down. One of the great fighters, and I do love Bob Fitzsimmons. Blake Gallimore says, I disagree. Willa just stood there. He would never beat any true boxer like that. I think Fred Fulton would have beat Jess Willard and took that title had they actually fought. I think that Jess Willard didn't want to fight Fred Fulton. You could say it was a duck. They almost fought. And that being said, I don't think Jess Willard would have held that title very long if he would have fought Fred Fulton during the period when Fred Fulton was really just icing a lot of guys left and right. The fight just never materialized. It was going to happen at one point in New Orleans, Louisiana. I forget what year, but the promoters ended up pulling some funny business and ended up being Jess Willard versus Frank Moran. And Moran, good, decent fighter, of course. And he fought some good competition and all that stuff, but wasn't able to, win the world heavyweight title because he was just a notch below. But that being said, had Fulton fought Jess Willard at that particular time, I do think that Jess Willard would have been defeated and Fred Fulton would have been world heavyweight champion. But unfortunately, we didn't get to see that. Black Boxing says, the fight that got me into boxing was Rocky Marciano versus Jersey Joe Walcott. Saw that when I was 10, and the rest is history. Hey, not a bad one right there. Without a doubt, Flat Boxing, not a bad one at all. I mean, that's probably generated one of the most famous pictures in boxing, if not the most famous, when he landed that CZQ and it left the distorted face of Jersey Joe Walcott as a memory. Insane. So that's a good one right there, flag boxing. I can see it, I can see it without a doubt. Rodolfo Rivera Jr. says 150,000 was a lot of money back then. No doubt about it, Rodolfo. No doubt about it. That would have been big time. That would have been bordering in that $1 million territory. From what I recall, it would have been bordering somewhere near there. I don't know the exact particulars, but Dempsey, he was able to get a lot of money when he fought George Carpentier, because that fight happened in a period, I think it was 1921, when he probably should have fought Harry Wills, but that was the first ever $1 million gate when the two of them fought. And there were a lot of circumstances that led to that, but certainly $150,000 was a lot of money, and they had the backing for it. So the money was not the issue in the Harry Wills versus Jack Dempsey fight. Of course, unless someone, like I said, if someone can link me to something that can validate and substantiate, and like I don't know it all. I certainly don't know it all. I just wasn't able to find anything related to a check bouncing, and that being the reason that the Dempsey Wills fight did not happen. I just want to repeat that. If someone actually knows something or can link something, drop it in the chat, whatever it may be. I want to check that out, and I will correct, and I'll do an updated video making sure that this information is out there. But I have heard that before, that it was because of some check bouncing. I just haven't seen anything to substantiate that in writing, at the very least. I haven't seen any of that. Martin says, Rodolfo, this is almost as much as you get, brother. No doubt about it. Rodolfo is over there rolling in the big bucks. I tell him that all the time. Shout out to Melissa Ty in the building. Appreciate you being here, showing love. Melissa Ty, hey, check her out. Go give her a follow, y'all. Melissa Ty, who is that? Come on now, let's do it. Rodolfo Rivera Jr. says Boz doing his due diligence in defending Jack Dempsey. Oh yeah, Boz got to defend Jack Dempsey. Boz, are you a Jack Dempsey fan like that? Come on, man. Come on now. No, it's funny. But Boz says, I believe Fireman Jim Flynn beat Dempsey early on and twice on point. Yeah, Fireman Jim Flynn knocked out Jack Dempsey. So at least that's how the story goes. I think there's some disputes surrounding it. I read something that alluded to the fact that Fireman Jim Flynn had Dempsey hurt and he was about to knock him out, and Dempsey's brother stepped in and threw in the sponge or threw in the towel, same equivalent, to prevent the actual KO. So I don't remember right now if it's a TKO or a KO. It could be reported as both, but supposedly that was the situation. Then I've heard some mention or some reporting that there might have been some funny business behind such. I don't know. All I know is, hey, something happened, and it ended up being a loss for Dempsey without a doubt in some form. So interesting stuff. Boz says, LOL, come on, Greb killed Dempsey. He was a small middleweight. Yeah, I don't know if he would kill him. Certainly, that 1919 version of Dempsey that I was talking about, that Dempsey we saw destroy Willard, Dempsey who came out with just grit and force. It was looking to get the job done right there, quick and in a matter of minutes. Yeah, that would have been tough sledding for Greb, because, as mentioned, Greb, he didn't have the punching power to defeat Dempsey, but he would have to do it by outpointing him, outpacing him, staying away, utilizing the ring, utilizing his speed, etc., and force Dempsey, especially like a plotting version of Dempsey, to kind of just continue looking for a shot or a chance to throw a shot. And that's essentially what we saw with the Dempsey in the two fights with Gene Tunney. He was just plotting forward, looking for any chance or opportunity he could get to throw a shot. And it happened in one of those rounds, of course, the long count fight. But that being said, outside of that version of Dempsey really didn't do much, didn't stand a chance. He had been out for a good while. He was more so Hollywood Dempsey at that particular time. So certainly it's conceivable to see Greb outpointing that version of Dempsey, of course, but it wouldn't have happened at that particular time, just given the fact that This was, I think, 1926 and 1927. And of course, we know Harry Greb died in 1926 due to unfortunate circumstances. Yeah, so, but Harry Greb, great fighter, certainly capable of doing so, though, Boz. He was capable of doing it. We'll never know who would have won, Dempsey versus Will. We can only make assumptions. No doubt about it. We can only make assumptions. There are many who think that Jack Dempsey would have handled Wills, and who felt Harry Wills was tailor-made for Jack Dempsey, and stood up to, or was, he was too stiff, I guess you can say, for Dempsey. I don't know. I feel that Wills was very much capable and one of the top tier guys at that particular time, and would have. I think he would have defeated Dempsey had they fought at that time, but I don't know for sure. Of course, it's definitely an assumption. Definitely an assumption. We can't say. Black Boxing says, I think Harry Wills was up 12-2 on Langford, something like that. Yeah, I know it got to a point that, Langford could no longer touch him. Now, Langford was able to knock out Harry Wills before in his career, so that shows you just the level of a prime Sam Langford, who was a smaller guy who came up in weight, of course, and he was able to do some things at heavyweight, and he had a lot of big-time fights as heavyweights. His career may be more known at heavyweight, as a matter of fact, but certainly, got to a point where he could not compete with Harry Wills, so that speaks volumes right there. And this was a Sam Langford that was still very formidable as it related to the sport as a whole. And Jack Dempsey even is quoted as saying he wanted no parts of Sam Langford, even at old age, when Sam Langford got a bit slower, bit fatter, and a bit long in the tooth, I guess you can say. But hey, he still carried that power. They say that's the last thing to go. Kylo Red Boz, what's going on, Bizaz? I was going too slow on Facebook, so I'm here now. Appreciate you being here in this mix right there. Fighting Highlights says, what's up, bro? Salute to you, Fighting Highlights. Hey, everyone check out Fighting Highlights, man. He's dropping them on the daily. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing over there, Fighting Highlights. Definitely a lot of content. Stay dropping. A lot of people tuning in. Love that stuff. So be sure to check them out. Appreciate you dropping by, Fighting Highlights. Thanks, bro. Been a minute. Appreciate you being here, though, without a doubt. Vaz, what's going on? Says, like the stream, guys. Oh, cool. Yeah, hey, if you want to, you're not forced to. Appreciate it, though, without a doubt. So appreciate it. Let's see what's going on here. Again, appreciate everybody being here. The intent was to talk about Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, one of the great middleweights, and I guess you could say welterweights, because Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, he often fought in the 140-ish pounds range, but he was able to become middleweight champion, and he won the belt at a lower weight, and it could vary back then as far as what weights they chose and stipulated for the championship being fought at. But we're talking about Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, and of course the Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey, the man we know as one of the great heavyweight champions in the sport's history, and certainly one of the most popular boxers, one of the most fan-garnering boxers in the sport's history, without a doubt. So salute to both of them. These were both guys who made a name in the sport. Even the larger Dempsey more so than the smaller Dempsey. And I think that's a part of the times as well, because along with Dempsey's reign on top, or at least his run there as heavyweight champion, we had video at that time, and it had been around for a good little bit, but things continue to advance from a technological standpoint as we go on. And that video, like for instance, him defeating Willard, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was shown in theaters and things of that nature. So that helped to boost things, that helped to boost his popularity, deservedly so, because that was definitely one of the most shocking, I guess you can say, contests captured on film. And at that particular time, it probably was the most, that's given that there was a limited amount of film. And of course, there was more stuff that was out there that has been destroyed, unfortunately, for those of us here in this particular time, because we're talking over 100 years ago in most cases. Supposedly, there was film of Jack Dempsey and Greb sparring, because there's film of him sparring someone else on that day as well. I can't remember who. So, man, it would be so cool to see that if it was out there. You never know. Always keep hopes up in some degree. Dan says, Blake, you sure you know your stuff? But Dempsey looked good against little fast boxers or big monsters. He dominated the great Gibbons, and don't forget Frenchie Carpentier. Tunney was just a phenomenon. Yeah, hey, Tunney was good. He was a very good boxer. Now, I think Tunney, since he's been a subject of a poll that I did, Tunney versus Jack Johnson. I like Tunney. He's a Marine. Hoorah! Shout out to him. Semper Fi to all my fellow Marines out there. I consider him the face of Marine boxing and everything. But certainly, I think his run at heavyweight gets a bit overrated, without a doubt. He was greater as a light heavyweight. That being said, he was able to do his thing at heavyweight. But his two biggest wins, of course, were the Jack Dempsey wins. Dan, I left this in the comment on a post that you made. Now, Gene Tunney, yeah, hell of a boxer, masterful boxer, very skilled. And, he's considered a scientific boxer. Some would say ahead of his time. I wouldn't say ahead of his time all the way. He studied film, all of that stuff. Of course, at that particular time, more was available. Some of the guys who came before him didn't have that opportunity just because technologically they weren't there and they weren't able to do such things. But he was a hell of a boxer, without a doubt. But that being said, yeah, I don't think he was unbeatable. And Harry Greb defeated Gene Tunney in their first fight, and arguably in a couple of the other fights in their series. But that first fight, he was no match for Harry Greb. And this was Harry Greb not even at his best in terms of his most formidable form. He was a little bit past it. He was already over 200 plus fights. He was already going blind in one eye, if not blind in one eye. And that just goes to show you the greatness of Harry Greb there. There's a guy who was on the channel thinking that Tunney was the greater fighter because he beat him in that series, but it's not all cut and dry as it may seem. You really have to dig through the stuff. Someone named Machiavelli, but I don't think he's really a person who he's purporting to be or whatever, pretending to be someone else. That being said, it is what it is. So Kylo Renba says Tunney fight came at the end of his prime and he did drop him. Yep, that is right. Dempsey had been out for a good bit there. Dempsey was not the same hungry fighter at that particular time, without a doubt, Boz. So that was a version of Dempsey, that slow plodding Dempsey that I mentioned. And Tunney beat him 19 of 20 rounds realistically. So that tells you everything right there. And of course, Dempsey never fought. He was still, in the shape to continue fighting. He did some things as a promoter. As a matter of fact, he was big on the Reno, Nevada scene. And ultimately, we know Las Vegas, Nevada became the hot spot for boxing. But certainly, that version of Dempsey that was defeated by Tunney wasn't one who was active and hungry in the same Manasseh Mauler that we had been accustomed to seeing at that particular time. So, but you can say that any fighter or whatever, there are certain things that can be picked apart, I guess you can say, in some capacity. You never know, but it is what it is. Dan says it seems pretty sure who took a dive for the quick cash against Flynn, but who knows? Flynn was a great resume dude. Yep, without a doubt. Fireman Jim Flynn, I have him on a list to do a video on him. But yeah, Flynn was in there with some of everybody. Tough and rugged veteran of the sport right there. Hundreds of fights. Name the fighter, he was in there with him. Any of the top level guys, from Dempsey to Sam Langford. You just named them. He was there. So yeah, there are certainly varying circumstances surrounding that particular fight, Dan, as you mentioned. So you never know. It's certainly an interesting point. Let me see. Let me go through these comments here. Again, we're talking Jack Dempsey to Manasseh Mauler. I'm like kind of behind on the comment tip. I'm like behind a good bit. The way I look at it, if you're not going to criticize Customato for protecting Floyd Patterson against heavy hitters and good fighters, don't criticize Jack Kearns. Hey, you're right. From what I know, Floyd Patterson pretty much had to force that fight with Sonny Liston. We all know what happened in both of them. But that's a good point there, flat boxing. Obviously, Ingo was a huge mistake, and they made Sonny wait as long as possible. Yep, Igmar Johansson. So you're right there, flat boxing, without a doubt. Ba says Ingo was a true force. Certainly, yeah. He was a very good boxer. Swedish, right? Johansson was Swedish. It's not bad. Yeah, hey, he was solid. He put his name in the heavyweight ranks. In the history of the sport, it would have been interesting to see him against Jack Dempsey, or not Jack Dempsey, but Rocky Marciano. Had timing and things of that nature worked out in the proper way. That would have been interesting. Or some of those other guys who came a little bit after or just before, but I think more so a little bit after actually. So Melissa Ty says that day in TV takes out everybody's answer. Yeah, right. Tuberculosis, no joke. I'm glad we have a cure now, at least to a certain degree. Bob says tuberculosis took out my grandfather. Yeah, man, Melissa Ty. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. It's nothing to be played with. Yeah, Rodolfo says it was a death sentence back then. Certainly, it's crazy. Boz says same guys that are down on Dempsey are usually down on Marciano. Wonder why? Too popular, I guess. Hey, you never know. That might be the case right there, Boz. That might very well be the case. Hey, I like both fighters. I definitely like Dempsey. You've seen I've done a lot of things on him. Marciano, definitely one of the most popular boxers in history. What I will say is Marciano, he fought the fights that he could fight that were available to him right there. He did what he did. He was able to get the victory. So what more can you say? What more can you say? He was able to pull off those victories, and he was undersized for the division. Didn't have the measurables that compared to some of the great heavyweights that we know in history, but he was still able to stamp his name in the game without a doubt. Flat Boxing says, I believe TB took out Joe Gans at 32 or 35. Yeah, I think it was about 35, somewhere around there. Black Boxing, of course, I think it starts to seep in a little bit earlier than the day you die or than the age that you die in. So, yeah, that took him out. And he came to I want to say he was at the Johnson versus Jeffries. Is it Johnson Jeffries? It might have been the Johnson Jeffries fight. That was like one of his last public appearances before passing away. And then he went back, I believe, to Baltimore. And he died. And battling Jim Johnson. 1918 Spanish flu took out battling Jim Johnson. Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy. I think it was something flu-like or pneumonia that took out Sam McVeigh, believe it or not. He was like 36 or 37 at the time. Crazy, how these tough guys, tough fighters can go through hell in the ring and back, and then something which we deal with today that is more common and we have vaccines for took them out. It's crazy. It's crazy. I must say. Let's see what's else going on here. Again, keep them coming. Keep them coming. People don't always appreciate how hard it is for the done switch guy. To make it big in the sport. Certainly, you got to have a little something about you. Boxing is very much a mental game, just as it is physical. So some boxers have that mental piece down. Some boxers have that physical piece down. Some people are blessed and gifted from a talent perspective on the physical side, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have that mental side down, and therefore you don't see them reach the pinnacle of the sports, the pinnacle of the championships in the sports. And hey, that's just I think that's why we love the sport too, because you have those varying things. Hey, shout out to my mom that dropped in the building, says hi son, make it do what it do, keep it 100. Yeah, try to do that without a doubt. Melissa Ty says, where are the receipts? Where are the receipts? Hey, I feel you right there. Where are the receipts? Dan, Bill Tate beat Willis in 1922 and had a draw with him in 1926. Oos Kundun KO Willis. Jack Sharkey beat Willis too in 1926. Willis was past it then. Willis is a great dude, but didn't really beat any great heavyweights. He beat Sam Langford, Sam McVeigh. I want to say Joe Jeanette as well. Top tier heavyweights right there, Dan. And Bill Tate, I believe one of those, he was either disqualified or broke his wrist in one of those fights. It was one of the two. But Bill Tate, just a big, sturdy guy, of course. Kid Norfolk was able to outpoint him. But no, certainly that's not the story of Harry Wills right there, Dan. I see what you're saying, but no, that is not it. Wills did beat some top-tier guys. Of course, he had a multi-fight series with Sam Langford, who many regard as the greatest fighter of all time. And he had multiple wins over Sam Langford. Sam McVay, as I mentioned, he knocked out Fred Fulton as well, the same guy that Dempsey got props for knocking out. So Harry Wills was able to knock out Fred Fulton in short fashion as well. So Harry Wills was very much a top tier guy. He knocked out Luis Angiofierpo after Tex Rickard had agreed that he had to go through some kind of tournament or whatever to get a shot at Jack Dempsey. So they put that stipulation on him. So in that tournament or whatever it may be, he knocked out Luis Angiofierpo. He beat Bartley Madden, another heavyweight from that time who was more in the contender rank. So Wills, he beat the top guys that put him in that slot or slated him to face Dempsey. So he had the resume to back it. So we disagree right there, Dan. He did beat some names, and that fight should have happened without a doubt. Melissa Todd, thank you for fact checking. I appreciate the shout out. Oh yeah, yes, without a doubt. Blake Gallimore, you got to remember Dempsey did horrible against small, fast boxer. There's never been anyone as fast as Greb. Greb went 45-0 with 1919. Indeed, he did. I have a video out there on that on the 86 Boxing channel. 1919, and this was against top level competition. And if you take it beyond a year, he went 52-0 before he actually got a draw, or maybe it was a loss. I think it was a draw or something of that nature. Might have been the Tommy Gibbons fights. I can't remember exactly, but he ended up going 52-0 beyond that single 1919 year. But in that 1919 year, I mean, what more can you say? 45-0 in a single year. That's more than some fighters' careers these days. So Greb was the truth. Thanks for the facts, Dan. Boz, what are you talking about? What facts? I know you're not talking about Harry Wills not fighting anyone. Did you not see the video I did on Harry Wills? I'm guessing you haven't checked it out, Boz. If you haven't checked out that video on Harry Wills, it's on the channel right there. That'll tell you everything you need to know about Harry Wills, how great he was, and why that fight with Dempsey never became a priority from the Dempsey camp. It never became a priority from the Dempsey camp. But like I was telling you, if you look at Harry Wills' resume, break it down, then you'll see why he is one of the top heavyweights in the history of the sport. Alistair Overeem, salute to you, Alistair. Appreciate you being here, buddy. Hey, I remember having some dialogue and chats with you, no doubt about it. He says the winner of Wills versus Dempsey is debatable. What's not debatable is the fight should have happened. Dempsey was protected, and I love Jack. There it is, Alistair Overeem. Hey, I don't think this is any pushback or hating on Dempsey. Hey, it is what it is. That fight could have happened. Hey, I love Dempsey. Done a lot of videos on Dempsey. One of my favorite heavyweights in history, period. But that being said, that fight with Wills, there's no reason that fight should have not happened. It should have happened. And yeah, you can't convince me it's a resume thing or any of that because Wills had the competition to back it. If you look at the run that Wills went on between 1918 and 1922, then you'll see why it was not a priority for them to face Harry Wills. Alistair, yes, that's the real Alistair Overeem. The ring representing the Dutch. Dan says Nonpareil Dempsey was a true pioneer, scientist boxers are true. Going back to 1840s, where the great boxers teaching scientific boxing, like our fearless leader, Professor Mike Donovan, without a doubt there, Dan, we're on the same page there. Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, one of those guys who pretty much had it all. He had a good mix of just boxing skill. He could get other boxers out of there with his punch and power and all that stuff at times. Had a decent amount of speed. Nothing overly glaring. He was just a very good all-around boxer at that particular time. And he was one of those guys who really was a pioneer of the sport, especially when you think about that shift to the Marquess of Queensberry rules. Because, a lot of those guys back then, they had some other fights in other situations, bare knuckle and all, London prize ring type fights. But that being said, they made that transition. And you'll see a lot of the bare knuckle guys who have a low amount of fights under the Marquess of Queensberry rules, but they put in a lot of work in the bare knuckle age. And like I said, you had to really think about how you were throwing punches in the ultimate result in the age of bare knuckle because you didn't have that protection there. And so if you're fighting in skin tight gloves and things of that nature, which often happen, then you have to certainly be leery of what is coming back to you. Flat Boxing says Uberim is scariest looking fighter to exist. Oh yes, when Overeem was on point, man, he was a beast. He was a beast there, yeah, and he had the skills to back. That I'll leave it there, of course. But yeah, he was definitely a good fighter. What does long in the tooth even mean? That's what Rodolfo said. Hey, that means you're getting up there in age, Rodolfo. You don't have to worry about that at the moment, but pretty soon you'll know what it's like. Long in the tooth, buddy. Like 2009 when juicing was flowing. Yeah. Flat boxing up here. Hey, he was running through cats for sure. Vod says we fill the chat room full of nonsense. Hey, it is what it is. Then Jim Mace was teaching sweet science in the mid 1800s. Without a doubt, Jim Mace, one of the pioneers of the game. As a matter of fact, he went to Australia or New Zealand. Bob Fitzsimmons grew up, or at least spent some time in New Zealand. He won a tournament. I think he won it twice that Jim Mace had put on in Australia, and that's kind of how he came to and kind of got discovered or whatever. So that tells you everything you need to know about the great Jim Mace right there. Dan says Fitzsimmons was the greatest. Hey, Dan, I know you've mentioned that. I got high regards, high respect for Fitzsimmons. He's certainly up there. He's certainly up there. If you rate him as the greatest, hey, I wouldn't argue against that. Hey, he was definitely top tier. First 3-division world champion, arguably the biggest puncher in the history of the sport. He fought from middleweight to heavyweight. And, he wasn't really a big guy. He was a slender man in terms of just his overall build, and he was still able to stamp his name in the game. One of the greats ever right there, without a doubt. Alistair Overeem, if you want to be technical, Bill Richmond invented the dive. Oh, yeah, Bill Richmond, the great bare-knuckle fighter, responsible for Tom Malinu becoming a more mature and great bare-knuckle fighter. Yeah, Bill Richmond, without a doubt. I don't know a ton about the bare-knuckle age, but there were some top-tier guys from back then. Only guys I really know of or really remember are Mendoza, Tom Cribb, of course, Tom Malinu, Bill Richmond, because I had heard this story on the radio about Bill Richmond. It was this past decade or whatever, where they were looking to relocate his, what do you call it? His, when someone has died and you have their, I guess, grave or whatever, they were looking to relocate his grave or whatever you call that to a different place because of some stuff that was going on or some construction or whatever it may be over in the UK. I think he was in the UK is where he was buried, and they were trying to reach his family or something of that nature. This was like the last decade at some point. I can't remember exactly when, but I remember recording it on my phone to try and hold up, I'm going to dig into this a bit more, but I ended up losing the recording or whatever. But Bill Richmond, yeah, legendary to the bare knuckle game. And these was one of the guys. So when you think about it, and we think about the Marquess of Queensberry, right? And so, and fighting during that time in the color line, we can go back beyond that, where guys were fighting each other, and there was no color line drawn. Think about the bare knuckle days. Hey, that tells you everything right there. Well, sorry, Vaz, but seeing Overeem's name gave me scary Uberim flashback. Uberim. Vaz says he was juicing before. That's when he was he was up there. Yeah, Black Box says actually that would probably be Daniel Mendoza. Yeah, Daniel Mendoza, beast in the game, without a doubt. Blake California, anyone looks good beating up a statue without a doubt there. Alistair Overeem, him starring Bill Tate, he sparred Greb after, and another guy after Greb. Good stuff. The Fairpo fight was legendary. Yes, sir, it was. Back and forth, action-packed on that Hagler Hearns type level, at least for that particular time. 7 knockdowns or something like that in the first round or something crazy, or somewhere in that neighborhood, right? Just crazy, back and forth. If you haven't seen that, check out Dempsey versus Fairpo. There's some stuff out there for sure. Then Harry Wills became very wealthy in NYC real estate, extremely intelligent. Indeed, yeah, he managed his money very well, especially compared to the other top black heavyweights from his era there, Dan. Yeah, Wills, he was able to live a very good life and invested, managed his money well. The same can't be said for Langford and McVeigh, of course. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but certainly, yeah, Wills did a good job with that. Probably had some, had the right people in this corner. I know he was married, his wife probably kept him on game and all that stuff. So that's good. You got to have the right people in your corners for sure to help with that type of stuff because it can go stray at any point. Martin Dunson says, "See you all later. Cheers, 86. It's sleepy. Go bye-bye for me now. Can't keep up with your kids." Hey, Martin, appreciate you, Martin. Hey, you're going to have to check back in with us. We'll be back without a doubt. I'm going to have to jump off here soon myself to come check out Pro Box. Pro Box TV has boxing on tonight. If you're a boxing fan, of course, with the modern stuff and all that as well, then, hey, we're always down to check out boxing. So Pro Box TV has a boxing card that is on tonight. It's going down in Plant City, Florida. That's their little facility there. If you're not familiar with Pro Box TV, just Google it. Should be showing on YouTube. They also have a little website or whatever where they stream it. It's like $199 a month or $18 for the year, which is pretty good price, for boxing. They have some pretty good solid matchups on there as well. It was just kicking off. I know it was kicking off as of 8 o'clock. But that being said, hey, we're going to go jump over there at some point. Dan says, "I joke around and call Greb Nonpareil because he is but a great heavyweight Dempsey. No prime for prime. I think even true great heavyweight all day." Yeah, hey, I feel you without a doubt. I feel you. Zone 6. Hey, salute to you, Zone 6. Appreciate you being here, buddy. Saw you earlier on BL stream. Hey, appreciate you. No doubt, Zone 6. Zone 6 says Jack Dempsey was a monster. He just didn't want any parts of Wills nor Langford. Hey, that's the way it was, Zone 6. They have him quoted saying he wanted no parts of the great Sam Langford, without a doubt. And, I think, when it came to Harry Wills, that fight could have happened. If he wanted it and demanded it, it could have happened. But you know what comes with that territory right there. But salute to Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler. Black Boxer says Langford was a bit past his best when Dempsey was at his best. Yes, that is true. That is true. So it could have been a respect thing. It's like, oh, yeah, I don't want any parts of him, speaking sort of casually and hyperbole or whatever. But that being said, of course, that one, I guess you can say it wasn't going to happen. But certainly Wills could have happened and should have happened. Alistair Overeem says last time Joe Gans entered the ring was a second to Langford when he fought Ketchel. Interesting. Good stuff right there. Gans, that was I remember that fight. I didn't know Gans was actually in the corner during that particular fight. I know that was supposed to lead to a potential championship middleweight matchup between Langford and Ketchel, but that didn't happen. There are varying reports. Some say Langford won, some say Ketchel won. I think I did a video on Ketchel. I think I listed Langford as a winner, but there's certainly some disputes out there. It could go either way, I guess you can say. Certainly varying. How the reporting, you just never know sometimes. And I don't know if there's some reporting that Langford wasn't going 100% because they had an agreement in place. And of course, as fate would have it, Ketchel was actually murdered, so they never got to rematch anyway. Crazy stuff right there. Boxing is crazy. Rodolfo Rivera Jr. says the Spanish flu was COVID back then. Yes, it was. Took a lot of people out. Zone 6 says, I think it's a balance of styles. The styles are praised in waves. Indeed they are. Flat Boxing says it especially was killing people throughout the world, like 1914. It was 1918 when it became a pandemic. Yeah, just think about that. It's kind of crazy. Kind of crazy how that is. Salute to you, boss. Wills had a historic title run. Zone 6, Harry Wills, right? Man, he was. Of course, he was colored world heavyweight champion. I think you're talking about Harry Wills. Willis, who is Willis? But I think it's Harry Wills, but for sure. Kylo Ren Boz, don't forget George Godfrey. And this will be the second George Godfrey. I'm pretty sure you're talking about Boz there. The Leaperville Shadow, an underrated fighter in history. Racked up a ton of knockouts. Big guy. I think he was around 6'3", 250, somewhere in that neighborhood. Had a good mix of speed, power, and he could box a good bit as well. Now, he was knocked out at points in his career, so he didn't have the chin of some of the greats, certainly at that elite level, but definitely a guy who was top tier and had the potential of winning a world heavyweight title. There's a film out there on the Libreville Shadow. There's also that footage of him taking on Primo Carnera, and we know Primo Carnera was a bigger guy. He was bigger than Godfrey. Carnera about 6'6", of course, 250, 260 plus, and Godfrey was beating him, and then it was some kind of crazy, scandalous-looking low blow call that forced him to be disqualified. But it's very, very interesting. People give me flack for saying McVeigh would have KO'd Jess Willard. I think he would have, Alistair Overeem. I don't know why they would give you flack from there. I have a video out there calling the Mike Tyson of his time. McVeigh was one of these tough cats. You think about what Mike Tyson was able to do, especially even against guys who are bigger, then have no doubt about it that the great Sam McVeigh, the Oxnard Cyclone, he would have been able to do what he does to Jess Willard. Of course, Jess Willard's strong suits were his endurance and his strength and his ability to kind of just hang in there. But that being said, Sam McVeigh, one of the most powerful punchers in the sport of boxing. He could box fairly well, but certainly, there are probably some who are more technical, but one of the toughest, and he had the competition to back it. You just look at his resume, and it'll tell you everything you need to know. Jess Willard fell to lesser guys, I will say. Jess Willard fell to lesser guys. So, Alistair Overeem, you're 100% in the right there. No doubt about it that the great Sam McVeigh would have been able to do his thing against Jess Willard. I think he would have, for sure. Bob says Steel Greb was not a heavyweight. No, he wasn't a heavyweight, without a doubt. Nobody would have let him fight Dempsey. Hey, Greb would have taken it. If they would have let him, if the promoter were down for it, he would have done it. You saw Mickey Walker in there with Max Smelling and Jack Sharkey. There's video out there, boys. And of course, Mickey Walker is the guy that Greb beat. And that fight was supposedly filmed. We got it in the little promo video film of Greb, the only video we really have of him. But they show him and Mickey Walker signing the contract. And Harry Greb beat Mickey Walker. We've seen Mickey Walker in the ring with heavyweights, giving Jack Sharkey, former world heavyweight champion, a run for his money. Max Smelling, on the other hand, had a little bit too much power for him. But that being said, we saw Walker in there mixing it up. And Harry Greb beat Mickey Walker. So that's very interesting right there. Flat Boxing says Greb was still far superior to Dempsey everywhere except power. Without a doubt, it's the only chance Dempsey has in a fight, and he's going to have to do it on his back foot. Can he do that? I don't know, but that's my opinion. Hey, great point right there, Flat Boxing. Like I was just saying, we saw Mickey Walker in there with heavyweights, and Greb beat him. We saw Kid Norfolk. There's a video. I think I put it on my channel as well, of Kid Norfolk in there. You see a shorter guy beating up on Big Bill Tate, who was 6'6", about 240 or whatever. So it was these guys back then were no stranger to fighting guys bigger than them. They didn't care. They didn't care at all, so they would do it. Dark Man, what's going on with you? Says, hello, folks. I think it was obvious that Jack Dempsey was protected from dangerous opponents like Wills and Harry Greb. Yeah, hey, like I said, hey, those fights should have happened right there. There was no reason they shouldn't have happened. Hey, Dark Man, appreciate you being here, buddy. Like I was saying, I'm looking for, that what is being reported, or at least what I've seen or heard at times, would more so say heard that Jack Dempsey didn't fight Wills because some kind of check bounce. When I was researching and looking for that, I couldn't substantiate such. From what I gathered, the money was there, and it just seems like they delayed the fight. There were so many this, that's, and this reason and whatnot as to why it didn't happen. So, yeah, I don't think it was a money thing. It's pretty crazy thinking about that, Dark Man. Appreciate you being here, buddy. Rodolfo Rivera, they be talking about boxing on the radio. That's a rarity now. Yeah, they barely do. Rodolfo. It's pretty crazy thinking about it. We barely see that. Occasionally you'll have some of the debate shows do a little this and that as it relates to boxing. They'll talk about it somewhat, but certainly not to the degree that probably they used to. Certainly. Dark Man, Alistair, hello. Does any of your fight contacts have Harry Garrett fighting films or lost documentary of Tiger Flowers? Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Man, it'll be so good to have that, man. That'll be so crazy to have that type of stuff pull up. Yeah, there's this documentary on Tiger Flowers. I think I was mentioning it. I know I was mentioning it somewhere. I don't know if it was yesterday or what. But man, we know for sure that there was a documentary done on it was like 1925 or 1926, somewhere around there, and it was lost. It's like, what the heck, man? How do you lose that type of stuff? When I think about the stuff that I've lost here in these modern times, and that's going back, of course, 100 years. But man, it would be so great to have that, and of course, some film of Greb. Right now, of course, we don't have any film of Tiger Flowers. We dope to have, but certainly we have some pictures, so we know the stuff went down. Just having those films would be the icing on the cake, I guess you can say. Yeah, if anybody knows of anything, man, we can reach out to them. Darkman, once again, Greb was not a heavyweight. Boz, yeah, he was not a heavyweight, but he fought heavyweights. That we cannot question without a doubt. He did fight heavyweights. He was not a heavyweight. He was a middleweight who went up to light heavyweight, and he fought heavyweights. Bob says it's like blaming Lennox Lewis for not fighting Floyd Mayweather. A little bit of difference right there, of course. That's a major difference in some sense. But, you have to factor in the time there, Bob. Yeah, it's a different time at that particular point compared to where we are now. So it was a regular thing. It was known in the sport that guys who were smaller would go up and fight some of the bigger guys at heavyweights, whether they were welterweights, middleweights, whatever. I mean, we know of Barbados Joe Walcott stopping Joe Chowinski, he fought at heavyweight. It was a light heavyweight primarily. But yeah, very interesting. Dan, Floyd Patterson was one of the greatest and most underrated fighters ever. 1952 gold medalist. Ingo had a huge punch KO him, but Floyd KO'd Ingo 2 times, and he did fight Liston 2 times. Yeah, Floyd, hey, he was good. He was legit. A brave fighter right there. Very good fighter. Definitely, you can see the style, because I think by virtue of Customado, but when you think Mike Tyson, you look at that era during Floyd Patterson's era, he is the original Mike Tyson stylistically. If you look at, how he threw his punches, that peekaboo style, I mean, pretty much the same thing. He's a bit lighter, of course, and probably more, cruiserweightish. But that being said, excellent fighter without a doubt. And Floyd was able to do his thing in the sport, stamp his name. At one point, the youngest ever world heavyweight champion, second youngest ever right now. Or Vladimir Klitschko. Yeah, big timer right there. I like Vlad. He's a very good boxer, no doubt about it. Darkman says, so what? Gene Tunney fight him always. Sam Langford fought Jack Johnson too. James Corbett fought John L. Sullivan too, and I think he was like 170, 160 pounds. Yeah, he was in that 170-ish range. May have gotten just above that without a doubt. Some of those smaller guys were always fighting up higher for sure. Is a thing. Bob says Gene was a light heavyweight who got bigger. Certainly. Same with Langford. Sam Langford was heavier than Greb, I'm sure. He might have been, but hey, Langford started at certain point in his career for sure. But Langford started pretty small. He started more in that lightweight range right there, Boz. As a matter of fact, Sam Langford fought Joe Gans with the world lightweight title on the line, and I think it was something with the weight or whatever that it ended up not being exchanged or not exchanging hands. But Sam Langford, he started at a lower weight. As far as I know, Greb started at middleweight, or at least around there. Can't remember for sure, but I want to say he started close to middleweight. It would have been welterweight at the smallest, but Sam Langford, he started more in that lightweight range down in that area. So from a technical standpoint, Greb was bigger than Langford if you think about where they started at. But that being said, where they finished. Of course, Greb never really did blow up into a full-fledged heavyweight or anything of that nature. But that being said, hey, they all would go up and fight without a doubt. So yeah, flat boxing, you put it there. Okay, I'm good. I'm catching up right here. Flat boxing said Langford started at lightweight, winning the colored middleweight title, fighting most of his career at heavyweight. Weight classes didn't matter to him, without a doubt. So yeah, flat boxing on it, without a doubt. Yeah, Langford started down there in that lightweight range because it's actually documented his fight with Joe Gans, who was the lightweight champion at that particular time. You know what I'm saying? So that speaks volumes in terms of how great Gans is to start at that weight and to think that he can move up and knock out full-fledged heavyweights. Hey, Zone 6, great show. Appreciate you, Zone 6, without a doubt. Bob says he was a freak of nature, Langford. Without a doubt, he was definitely a freak of nature. Darkman says Bob Fitzsimmons fought James Corbett, James Jeffrey too, and there are even newspaper that confirmed that Harry Greb versus Jack Dempsey was in the talks, and also there's some even some newspapers that I noticed some other piece confirms that Doc Kearns and Jack Dempsey ducked Harry Greb. Yeah, they didn't want it. I know I've gotten stuff. Oh yeah, you good, Zone 6? I thought that's what it is. But Darkman, yeah, I know I've seen where Doc Kearns was quoted saying he didn't want Dempsey to fight Wills, and he said that he didn't think the fight would be big enough, even though there were many clamoring for it from the fans and newspaper media journalists alike. And Kern said he didn't think the money was there, even though, like I said, the money was there. The money was no doubt there. I think they just didn't want those problems for sure. Vibes says, give it a red dark man. You really think Dempsey was afraid of Greb? I think he didn't want to look crazy against Greb. Greb could make these fighters look bad. You know, Dempsey, it wouldn't have been a good look for him to be the heavyweight champion of the world, to get in there with the middleweight in some sense that is Harry Greb and not have a good showing, because he likely would have not had a good showing. You think about all the guys that fought Greb. For the most part, none of them had a good showing. Look at what Greb was able to do to Tunney, while Tunney was a light heavyweight, which was pretty much Tunney's best weight, and Greb wasn't at his most formidable self. This wasn't a prime Greb, and he was able to destroy Gene Tunney at light heavyweight, which is in actuality is Gene Tunney's best weight. And yeah, Tunney looked horrible in that process. So I think it was more of that than anything. Flat boxing, Greb at his best was anywhere from 168 to 175. Langford was around 175, 185. Yep, indeed. Langford later in his career got up above 200, but he was older and past it at the time, without a doubt. And he certainly was not putting in that same type of work to get down in weight as he had been. Flat boxing, Langford in his prime was a rock, without a doubt. He had a long reach, broad chest for his size or whatever. He was a thick guy, and he could punch. Some people are just naturally gifted with that punch. You look at some of those videos out there on Langford, you can see that. The video of him and Bill Lane, the video of him and Joe Jeanette, and that's one of the later fights between him and Jeanette. You can just see it. Langford was just a stocky, solidly built guy. Bob says, I believe that at the time Dempsey was champion, Greb was a middleweight, and most of that time, correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, he might have been fighting between middleweight and light heavyweight between the two, but I know that Greb went up and fought Tommy Gibbons, someone that Dempsey fought at heavyweight, and Greb pretty much handled Tommy Gibbons, and he did that as a means to show that he was ready for Jack Dempsey. So, hey, it was definitely there and ready to go. Flat Boxing says Greb was an American light heavyweight champion sometime around there. Certainly, yeah. Darkman, I mean, it's understandable that Jack Dempsey was afraid of having everything to lose against a fighter that was not as famous as him, but it's lame at the same time. Certainly, yeah. He didn't want those prize, Darkman. He didn't want the prize. Yeah, so much to lose. I guess less to gain, or however they say that. High risk, lower reward. You know, certainly more of a reward for Greb if he were to beat him. Bob says saying Dempsey duck Greb is like saying Holyfield duck Roy Jones. It's a fight that maybe could have been made, but wasn't that relevant for their respective rankings in their respective division. I don't know about that, Boz. I think the Greb versus Dempsey fight was very much relevant. Now that one, I'm with you. I don't know about Roy Jones versus Evander Holyfield. I don't remember anyone clamoring for that. And Roy only fought that one fight at heavyweight. Just thinking about it, we're talking about from that perspective. Flag, he was small for a light heavy. Yes, he was small without a doubt. I know what 86 Boxing had said that the documentary that had Harry Greb fighting film, also in search of fight films of Greb, I found comments that say that there was a Harry Greb extra footage on YouTube, but got taken down. Yeah, that's crazy. I've been hearing people saying that some other videos were taken down. Like there was a video supposedly of Jack McAuliffe, the first lightweight champion in boxing history, or lightweight world champion in boxing history. There's a video of him sparring Jack Dempsey or something like that was taken down. And I'm just like, what the heck? Why would YouTube do that jump? I thought the whole copyright thing or public domain thing would come into play and the copyright wouldn't be in existence if we're going back that far. From what I understood, I thought it was 75 years or something of that nature, but maybe there's more to it than what I think. But yeah, that's crazy to think that they would do that. But of course, you have to be careful. I mean, I guess it's their platform, so they can do what it does. It is pretty crazy. But it would be cool to see some of those fights. Flat Boxer says, I would think Jack Dempsey would take multiple pictures with Greb if he was afraid of the dark man. Oh, yeah, got you there. Yeah, I don't know if he, shaking in his boots type thing. Yeah, not that type of afraid. I think it was just more so high risk in terms of looking bad against Greb, low reward, really no real reason to have fought him when he had other options for sure. Darkman says, I also found a guy in the channel of Legends of Boxing in color saying that he had Harry Greb films. Interesting. I wonder if he's just talking about the little newsreel things. That's all I've seen thus far, the newsreels. I know the Steve Compton guy who did the book on Harry Greb. He was saying he was looking for stuff. They weren't able to find anything, but he mentioned he could confirm that there was, I want to say, 5 fights for sure that were filmed. But of course, we don't have any of them, at least the fights. We only have that newsreel. But that would be very interesting if something like that popped up. But I appreciate those guys who are on there who are able to fix the frame rates on these videos and get them up and have them looking good. And I think that's pretty dope for sure. Flack says he wasn't small for a light heavyweight. He was short for a light heavy. He even outweighed the man who I consider the light heavyweight GOAT, Tommy Loughran. Tommy Loughran, the Philly Phantom. Tommy Loughran, yeah, one of the best ever right there. Very underrated fighter. Had a super tough career. Did his thing. Flack, good call there. Philly, man, they produce so many great fighters. Tommy Loughran being one of them. Just a very fluid style. There's some decent amount of video out there on Tommy Loughran. Some good video where people have kind of made it HD or whatever. So shout out to the Philly Phantom, the Phantom of Philly, Tommy Loughran. Certainly one of the best right there. And he went on to fight at heavyweight or light heavyweight, of course. I mean heavyweight, right. He fought at light heavyweight. He went on to fight at heavyweight as well. So yeah, he can handle himself without a doubt. Boz says Dempsey didn't know what fear in the ring meant. Yeah, maybe there, Boz. Darkman said, I don't mean to say that Jack Dempsey was afraid of seeing Harry Greb, even in picture. I said he was afraid to have a fight with Greb for the title. Certainly wouldn't have been a good look. Dan Dempsey was a gracious gentleman and said that about Langford because of respect. Yeah, I figured there was some of that to it. Langford was very old and blind at the end, of course, and in no condition to fight Dempsey. Certainly. Sort of like Holyfield or Vladimir Klitschko didn't want to fight Evander Holyfield. I would kind of lump it in there for sure. Certainly. But yeah, prime Langford would have certainly been more of a beast of a fighter. Boz says he might have been unwilling to take a risk to lose to a much smaller guy and knew that Greb was clever, but if Greb had been so relevant at heavyweight, I think Jack would fight him. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he could have fought Harry Wells, who was certainly relevant at heavyweight. And the accounts for the time will tell you that many people were calling for it. They were saying they were reporting, and it was commonly known that hey, there was a view that no heavyweight in the world other than Harry Wills at the time would be the one or could be the one to dethrone Jack Dempsey. We just didn't get it. Prime for prime, I still got Dempsey. He was a super great heavyweight. Hey, yeah, hey, you can't go wrong with that. Can't go wrong. Certainly, an argument can definitely be made. As mentioned, I do have Harry Wills over Dempsey prime for prime, but certainly an argument could be made for Dempsey. And Dempsey, like I said, still one of my favorite heavyweights just to watch and thinking about his aura and all. I think you bought into the Harry Greb myth. He was great, but not invincible. Certainly not invincible. Yeah, he took some L's and all that stuff, but one of the best resumes, if not the best resume in boxing history, and a guy who would traverse the weights in whatever way he could, and he had the competition to back it without a doubt there, Boz. I give Sam Langford the edge over Harry Greb because of the fact that Sam Langford was able to carry his power up in weight. Now, Harry Greb didn't have power, but I don't think Greb in totality is a myth. There's no doubt that he's one of the greats ever. And if you look at his resume, he beat some of the greatest boxers in history. So Greb, in a sense, is not a myth. Maybe what he could have done at heavyweight against some of the great heavyweights, I guess you can make an argument there, but certainly not a myth. He was beaten twice by Tunney, of course, and some of those fights were arguable there, Boz. They weren't all straight cookie cutter fights. There were some questionable things surrounding a couple of those fights, especially one that was considered a draw that many felt Greb should have won. Then I believe there was another one that was a similar situation. And if you think about the first fight, like I said, Harry Greb dissected Gene Tunney, gave him a beating, the only man to beat him. And this was not a prime Harry Greb. So that goes a long way right there. Dan says, don't forget Smelling did stop Walker, Max Smelling, Kel. Yep, I did mention that. Smelling did stop Mickey Walker. Mickey Walker was in there trying to bang it out and bit off more than he could chew, without a doubt. Smelling did do that. Smelling, very good boxer, very good puncher as well. One of the great heavyweights from that era. Certainly deserves his respect. You know, he stopped Lewis, of course, the first man to do so. And it wasn't a fluke. But Lewis came back with a vengeance and showed that, hey, he was the best of that time for sure. Darkman, I'm with Harry Greb in that fight. Not saying that he was unbeatable. He definitely had a chance of beating Jack Dempsey if he did it in sparring. It's not too hard to imagine it in the ring for titles. Yeah, I think, hey, there's a conceivable way in which Harry Greb could have won it, without a doubt. There is a conceivable way, without a doubt. Dark man, I'm with you there, certainly. Blake Gallimore says the biggest advantage Greb would have over Dempsey is speed and volume of punching, 100 to 150 punches around. Yes. And from all accounts and what is been documented, he was that type of fighter. And that's the one thing that that's one of the many things that everybody was saying about him, who were his peers, who were his opponents. We have that on record with everyone saying about it. You have numerous accounts of individuals saying he's the greatest fighter ever. So what he would have to worry about is the power of Dempsey, without a doubt. But, Dempsey outboxing him just straight up. Of course, I don't know that that's the case. Bob says Dempsey getting quite a lot of criticism tonight. No, this is a video showing love to the great Jack Dempsey, one of the great heavyweights of all time, one of the most popular boxers of all time. We're just speaking about some of the particulars surrounding him. And also Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, one of the great middleweights of all time. You could throw him in the welterweight ranks as well, because he fought many fights at 140 pounds or 140 something pounds. But that being said, he wasn't a welterweight champion, but one of the great middleweight champions. He's actually the second middleweight champion. They have this other guy who's credited as the first. I don't really know him. Last name Duffy or something like that. But that being said, the Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, a true pioneer of the middleweight division, a fighter who, was just one of the greats of the 1800s, late 1800s, mid to late, I guess you can say. Flag boxing, he was past his best, and Gene Tunney was one of the most skilled heavyweights ever. I wouldn't ever use those controversial, excluding the last fight, against him without a doubt. Yeah, this wasn't the best grab right here. And hey, we know the regard that Tony is held in. I think it just speaks to how great of a fighter Harry Greb is right there. So yes, Tony did win the series, but I don't think that tells the story of the fighters and their careers overall, because Greb, I mean, hardly matched as a fighter. Dan Nonpareil Greb was in the league of his own, Dark Man, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. There were talks of Holyfield versus Jones being made. Okay, yeah, I didn't hear that. But after Holy was the champion. Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. Oh, when he was no longer champion. But yeah, Jones, didn't have but that one fight. A great feat for sure. Flack is amazing analytical historian, knows his business. No doubt about it. Salute to Flack Boxing. Check him out. Yeah, he stays on game. Would appreciate you being here, Flack, without a doubt. Darkman, I don't mean to disrespect number one. I just say my opinion, trying to reach the truth or proof that I found. But anyways, even if Grab could have had the chance, we can just think but don't see what could have happened. Yeah, without a doubt, Darkman. Yeah, I mean, hey, it's always 50-50 coin flip. Certain things look a certain way on paper and all that stuff. You never know until the fighters are actually there in the ring. All we know is what it boils down to. If you just look at it fighter for fighter, resume for resume, all that stuff, some fighters stand out a bit more than others, and they have the backing to go along with it, you know. Black boxers, I get where you're coming from, Boz. I would be annoyed if my favorite boxer was being disrespected as well. No disrespect here. Boz says, no, I like Dempsey, but don't consider him a favorite. Hey, I consider a Dempsey a favorite. I've done a number of videos on him, you know. This is just pointing out some of those things without a doubt. But I do think that Dempsey would have did his thing against many heavyweights. So I'd favor him over many heavyweights for sure. 86, we need a video on Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. We didn't get to talk much about him. We got carried away. Certainly, we'll have to do this again on Nonpareil. You know, I wanted to do more stuff on him. Maybe earlier I did. Certainly, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, great fighter, man. It's hard to sum it up, of course, just in single words or whatever, like what I'm trying to do. And we haven't spent a ton of time on him. And that's like I was kind of saying, it's hard to move past the Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey because of what he was able to accomplish in the sport, and it overshadows the Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, certainly. But that being said, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, we don't have film or anything of that nature on him, but one of the greats of his time, had some great fights, some legendary fights, if you really look at it from the standpoint of just the conditions that they were fighting in at the time. They were pretty much lace them up anywhere, anytime, any place. I was telling you about the multi-location fight. He had a number of other fights that went long, drawn out, and he was a pioneer for sure. He's a pioneer for sure. Yeah, we did get to talking about Harry Greb. Hey, he got to come in there. Bob says Tootie beat him twice. Haha, admit that. Yeah, Tootie did beat him. Yeah. His Greb's best was in the past flat. Yeah, Boz. Hey, that was not the best of Harry Greb right there. No doubt about it. That was not the best of Harry Greb. Harry Greb should have been world middleweight champion long before he became world middleweight champion. You know, he beat Johnny Wilson to get that title, but it should have happened way before that, without a doubt. Boz says it's ridiculous, frankly. I never even heard of Greb being a possible opponent for Dempsey. Hey, he was. Hey, you gotta check out some stories out there. You can hear about. There's some stuff out there, Boz, on what went down and Greb calling him out. Greb was ready. Look at one of those videos. One of the last videos I put out there was a direct quote from Greb on how he felt about the fight, and he thinks he could have beat Dempsey. Thinking and actually doing is another story, but certainly Greb was one of those guys who was just on one of those all-time tiers as far as just boxers in general. They're those great boxers, and Greb, you know, much like Langford and then some of the others out there, they could be in a tier of their own, you know. He's just different like that, you know. He has the greatest resume in boxing history as far as I'm concerned in terms of just the individuals he fought. Crazy. Dan says 20 years after gold medal, Patterson in 72, age 40, beat two great heavyweights in Bonavina and got stopped on cuts against Ali. even in a fight at the time. Yeah. So, yeah, that speaks volumes of the great Floyd Patterson. Yeah, Floyd Patterson was legit without a doubt. It was something I've heard for a long time. That Greb fought heavyweights didn't make him a top ranked heavyweight. He's not a top ranked heavyweight in boxing history. Certainly, Boz, he's definitely not that. A lot of interesting. Yeah, he's not a top ranked heavyweight. He's just a top ranked fighter in general. Tunney was a genius. Yes, indeed. Yeah, you got a lot of tools in the tool shed. Please, some respect. I'm sick and tired of these ducking accusations when it comes to this, and yet nobody talks about the guys Holmes ducked. Oh, Larry Holmes, he ducked some folks. Let us know. I want to know about it. Blake Gallimore says Dempsey is known for his power, but Greb was only stopped one time in his 7th fight out of 300 fights. Yeah, that speaks volumes, and he didn't have punching power of his own, as we said. Flat Boxing says, I was just telling you what I heard for years. That may be it's irrelevant now. Yeah. And yeah, Greb lost like 2 or 3 times against Tunney, but he said by the crowd of professionals that he deserved to draw once and got robbed in the second or third. Forgot which one. I think it was the second one right there, Dark Man. Same thing. People like a lot of nonsense in sports. Flat. The last fight with Greb and Tunney, he got obliterated. The newspaper said he looked slow and old. I wouldn't doubt it. You know, he was pretty much going blind in one eye, if not blind in that eye at that particular time. Had a lot of wear and tear. You got to think about the fact that Greb, when he fought Tunney the first time, was over 200 fights. 200 fights. Holmes ducked Greg Page, Pinklin Smith, and a few more guys, but nobody talks about that, or rarely anyone. We can talk about that, Bob. We can talk about it on Boxing Shit. You know more about that than I do right there. You know, I don't know. I know more about the older guys going way back here to this time, but certainly we can talk about some of that ducking that Larry Holmes did. Larry Holmes wouldn't want to hear you saying that because Larry Holmes feels like he's the GOAT. Darkman, in my case, I've said I have proofs behind it. No airfield words. Hey, good stuff, Darkman. But it's a shame, too. Even Canelo seemed to be ducking Bivol and Benavidez right now. I wanted to see Canelo versus Bivol. Versus Benavidez. I think that was the fight to be made right there. 168 pounds. No reason that shouldn't happen. Flat Boxer says, I don't care much for boxing post 1960. I feel you. Yeah, I try to focus on the stuff, yeah, as you've seen from the videos that I do. Definitely going back well beyond that period for sure. I feel like there's a lot of stuff out there on some of those guys. A lot of the guys I tend to do stuff on, there's really not much video on them, you know. Thinking about some of those guys like Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, of course. Just these guys that don't have a ton of video. Jack Blackburn, Joe Gans, he doesn't have a ton of video. Thinking about Langford McVeigh, Wills, Jeanette, etc. Yeah, some great stuff that was happening back then. Mysterious Billy Smith. What do you mean about legacy, fighting condition, and mentality, or everything? Dark man, you talking about me? Because I mean, I know for me in specific, of course, I think all of that certainly factors in to a fighter or whatever in terms of their overall career and what they were able to accomplish. But yeah, varying things, I think those just add to the attributes for sure. Bob says every champion ducked or didn't fight someone. Nobody fought absolute everyone. That's boxing. Certainly. Even the great Sam Langford, there were some fights he didn't get, and so we therefore didn't get to see them. And it's a shame, but it certainly happens. It didn't happen, or some of those fights didn't happen. I mean, Joe Gans, one of my favorite fighters of all time. He would have his moments for sure. He knew that Jack Blackburn was a problem, so he had to have certain stipulations in place in order to beat Jack Blackburn, one of the greats right there. We know he was a great trainer as well as a great fighter in himself. Mentality, mostly Dark Man. The boxing marvel, Jack Britton. Holyfield would have knocked out Vitchko. Good stuff over there, Dan. Oh, yeah, certainly prime Holyfield, without a doubt. Duck nobody. Oh yeah. Oh, Flat. You're saying the boxing marvel, Jack Britton. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, he fought crazy amount of fights, 300 plus fights that we know of, at least. Him and Ted Kid Lewis, insane. So yeah, I think they were been gaming down for anyone. Gallimore says Greb's backers put up 100,000 plus 50% at the gate for Dempsey to fight Greb. Dempsey fought Carpentier for less. less. That would have been dope. You know, Dempsey actually ended up getting more Blake from the royalties tied to radio. That was the first fight broadcast on radio that Dempsey Carpentier, and there were royalties that were guaranteed to them after that. So when it was all said and done, from what I've gathered, Dempsey made somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000. Carpentier, it was more in that $200,000 range. But that being said, it was because of the radio royalties. RCA being the broadcast partner at that particular time. That's what put RCA on the map. Of course, they were a big company. They're still around, but of course not as big as like Samsung, Apple, Sony, and all of them right now. But RCA is still around. Darkman said, "What do you see that change in Canelo mentality?" Kylo. But yeah. Kylo being Ren Ba says, "I meant Pinklin Thompson." Pinklin Thomas. Yeah. Pinklin. Yeah. He was the heavyweight from that particular time frame. Contender for sure. Flat Boxing says, "I love the story of Britain versus Kid Lewis story." Yeah, without a doubt. Hey, I'm working on a video for that, Flat. As a matter of fact, I've started it. I like to say that I'm about a fifth or fourth through, but you know, I haven't worked on it in a good little bit. But I'm working on a video, but it focuses specifically on that rivalry, those 20 fights right there, Flat. And I want it to be dope, without a doubt. I want it to be one of the best. Well, every time I'm out, I try to aim to make it every video better than the previous. So I want it to be the best one yet. So I'm still working it. I need to find more stuff on Jack Britton. Interestingly enough, I can find a lot more stuff on Ted Kid Lewis, the UK fighter, but not as much on Jack Britton. I know he's from Clinton, New York, this small town of, I want to say 2,000 or something like that. And there's some other person that was from there who was a famous person. I forget who it is. But that being said, I haven't been able to find as much as I thought I'd be able to find on Jack Britton. But I'm going to continue digging through. I might have to start that back up. But certainly one in the works right there. I know Boxing Librarian has done a lot of stuff on them. Shout out to the Boxing Librarian. Definitely worth checking out. Rodolfo says, Vibes wants all the smoke. He does. He wants all the smoke tonight. Dan says, no resume compares with Nonpareil Greb. Without a doubt, Dan. I mean, you look through it, it's just littered with some of the greatest you could ever seen from you could have ever seen, from Mickey Walker to the Bayonne Globetrotter, Jeff Smith, Maxie Rosenblum, freaking Tiger Flowers, Mike O'Dowd, Harry Greb, Kid Norfolk. I mean, Johnny Wilson, former world middleweight champion. You just name it. I mean, yeah. I think that, me personally, I think that Harry Greb has the best resume in boxing history. That's thinking about all the people. Holmes also didn't fight Coetzee, Dokes, and Tubbs. Oh, very interesting right there. Coetzee, the South African fighter, he passed away not too long ago. I think it was it this year or last year? Blake Gallimore Bods. Greb is the guy, along with Langford, that actually did not duck anyone. Yeah, they fought some of everybody. We got a Greb fanatic here. Okay. You got to remember that Greb was beating like I said, you're funny there, Vibes. Enough about Harry Greb. We aren't here to talk about him for freak's sake. That's true. We're not here to talk about Greb. We're here to talk about Jack Dempsey and Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Both of them are Jack Dempseys, of course. That's who we are initially here to talk about. Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, John Edward Kelly, that his name, and William Harrison Dempsey, who we know as Jack. That's who this video was originally supposed to be about, in the careers of the two. Now, we spoke a lot about the heavyweight Jack Dempsey, of course. Now, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, he doesn't have as much stuff out there on him in the same case as the heavyweight Dempsey. And of course, Nonpareil Dempsey, we don't have video. We only have accounts. Now talking about what everyone is, there any footage of film about Nonpareil Jack Dempsey? No, there's not, Dark Man. Man, it would have been dope if he did have some. You know, he died of tuberculosis. I want to say it was 1892. I feel like it was somewhere around there. And this was, you know, just before, you know, we started to get to that point where video was becoming available. He was 32 at the time that he died. So I'd imagine we would have saw him as an up there fighter, a little bit older in fight age, as far as you know, when the video came around, or at least there were more of it that was out there. That I feel we would have had video of him had he not died of tuberculosis. That took him out before we could get video of him. So there are some pictures out there, a limited amount. I've done a little facial movement videos on him. But that being said, no video of the great Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. But I think we would have had it. Same with John L. Sullivan had he continued his form. Because interestingly enough, John L. Sullivan was close to the same age in 1892 when he had his last fight. I think Sullivan was 32 or maybe 33 at the time, somewhere around there, when he lost to James J. Corbett. But that was, of course, Sullivan's last fight. And that video of Corbett against James J. Corbett against Peter Courtney, which is, I believe, the first boxing video of two boxers. I believe that video is, I believe it's the first, at least, and that was intended to be John L. Sullivan. Thomas Edison was behind it, and John L. Sullivan turned it down because he wanted more money or something like that. I can't remember what it was. I want to say somewhere around $5,000 might have been what Corbett got to do that. And he was the champion at the time, but I believe Thomas Edison went for John L. Sullivan first, but Sullivan didn't do it. And of course, we never got video of Sullivan, at least a formidable form of Sullivan. Right now, the only thing we have is that when he's at older age, he's in his like 50s or 60s at the time. I think he died at like 64 or something like that. So it might have been late 50s at the time of the Jack Johnson fight, where he's shaking hands with Sullivan or shaking hands with Corbett. And then there's one where he's punching a double end. I think it's a double end bag or speed bag. I think it's a speed bag. He's punching that, but that's all we have right there. But it could have happened. How did Bob says, how did the conversation about two Jack Dempsey turn into a debate? Dempsey, duck, and grab. Yeah, that happened. It happened. I don't know how we got that far off of it. Yeah, forgot about it. But yeah, it wasn't supposed to be there. Hey, I'm with you right there, Bob. It's supposed to be about the Dempseys for sure. Dan says Tony is maybe the most underrated ever. Turned into a big rock solid heavyweight at his prime. Married rich socialite, made him quit. 81-1, 50 KOs against tough fighters in history. Hey, Tony is one of the greats for sure. He's certainly one of the greats. What I say is his heavyweight run, yeah, there was still much to be desired as far as his heavyweight run. We didn't get to see the absolute best of Tony at heavyweight. You know, he had a better run at light heavyweight for sure, and he beat some top tier talent for sure. And he beat Jack Dempsey at heavyweight, and he beat some other guys as well. But certainly, Tony, Dan, yeah, we're in agreement. Great fighter, one of the all-time elite fighters. But yeah, he didn't really have, you know, a long career at heavyweight. So he put in more work at light heavyweight, certainly. Black boxing Tony like a big eighth grader indeed. Darkman said, I love this channel, the community here. Wish the best to all you good folks here. Hey, appreciate you, Darkman, without a doubt. Same here. We love to have a debate. Salute to Boz. We need him here. We need him on the debate. This one is about to hit the 2-hour mark. Yeah, I know there, Boz. It's crazy how that goes. Crazy how that goes. Hey, but we love it. Hey, Darkman, we gotta keep it going, especially when we get into the history stuff. Sometimes it tends to drag out or whatever. Dan, why do you think Kid Blackie took his name? Nonpareil Dempsey is great. Just ran into Fitzsimmons. Certainly. Yeah, Fitzsimmons. I mean, Dan, like I said, hey, I got mad respect for Fitzsimmons. I know that I'm in the minority, probably you too, Dan, but as far as the great middleweights of all time, I put Bob Fitzsimmons numero uno. If you haven't heard it here, you heard it here now. I put Bob Fitzsimmons numero uno, and that's saying a lot because, of course, we know we got Sugar Ray Robinson, who is regarded as, or at least majority of the footage that we have out there is him at middleweight. So he gets the billing in most cases. But, hey, I got nothing but mad props for Bob Fitzsimmons, the fighting blacksmith, a.k.a. Ruby Roberts. I mean, legit. And it's crazy to be able to have footage of him doing his thing, and this is a guy who was fearless, would challenge anyone without a doubt. And he did take the title from Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Yeah. Rodolfo Rivera, as I would say, cheers, but I can't drink. Hey, at some point, Rodolfo, it's all good. It's all good. I got you. Flat Boxing. Hey, thanks for the super chat, Flat Boxing. Cheers. Salute to Flat Boxing, everyone. Big ups, Flat. Hey, you did the same thing yesterday, man. Appreciate you without a doubt. Love engaging, being able to have these conversations and all that stuff with your Flat. Hey, anytime. Yeah, it's all love. We just like talking about the history of the sport, so I'm down for it. But yeah, funny stuff going on here. We've turned this into a Harry Grab video. Harry Grab, Gene Tunney, probably more than anything. But it's all good. Can I please put someone on timeout just for fun's sake? You kidding? I got you there, Vibes. You funny. Blake is my top candidate. That is funny. Hey, Blake been putting the truth out there. Hey, he been keeping it real out there on Dempsey. Cut him no slack. Cut him no slack. By the looks, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey seemed to be a tough and solid warrior. Hey, he was right there, without a doubt, Dark Man. He was a tough dude. I have a video out there, but it's one of my earlier videos that I did when I started kind of just really focusing on the video. So I think I used that computer voice. It was like a little text-to-speech voice on it, as a matter of fact. So I wanted to do something bigger, but there were some good fighters he fought in his career, George LeBlanc being one of them. Of course, Bob Fitzsimmons. He fought Tommy Ryan at the end of his career, but he was past his prime at that particular time, and that was actually his last fight. And then he died of tuberculosis after that. But if you see, you'll see the Tommy Ryan video. That's one of the latest ones that I've done. And he's another great fighter from that period, at least. And yeah, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, I mentioned that fight in there and the fact that, or what happened with him in that regard. But I think Nonpareil, he avenged that loss on LeBlanc. He fought some other pretty top tier fighters at the time. See, some of these guys, they ultimately didn't have as big names under Marcus of Queensberry rules, but those guys were fighting bare knuckles and fighting any kind of way at that particular time. They were just getting in how they could get it in. I said, Dark Man, you come close to. Don't piss me off more. Vibes is a trip here, rather, so I can get some practice. Just for the roast out of your mom scared of middleweight kid swallow truth. Sorry, man. Hey, y'all are funny here. Y'all are funny. Hey, that's crazy. Dan, to Dark Man, you said it, bro. Love to all on this channel. A bunch of great, intelligent people are feelings later. Hey, salute to you, Dan. Good stuff. 85, sip for five with doubt. Don't forget to look up Marine Supreme, Danny Nardico, and Billy Grant. Oh, yeah, that is right. I got you there, Dan. You did mention that. I'm going to check them out without a doubt. I did a top 10, top 8 fighting Marines videos, of course, and it has some of the top Marines who fought there. But hey, certainly I got to check them out. I've been needing to do a part 2. I didn't include Spinks. What is it? Michael Spinks? No, Larry. Is Leon Spinks. I didn't include him on the list. Of course, he had a good start to his career, but of course, yeah, it went all downhill from there. Poland Ball 69, salute to you, aka Fight Fan. Salute. Hey, check out Poland Ball, y'all, or check out Fight Fan. I know that's his page. We got some stuff on there. Some good stuff, without a doubt. He said Nonpareil is the most underrated middleweight ever. Yeah, you rarely see him mentioned, but as mentioned, he got that name Nonpareil because he was putting in work and considered to be unbeatable at his time or during his time. So I think that speaks volume. I'll get the gloves, 8-ounce flat boxing. Hey, let's do it. I officiate. I'm with USA Boxing officials. So, hey, we want to get a match going, an 86 boxing contest going. I can officiate. I got it. I've done a number of them in a row before. So however we end up with the lineup, I'm down for it. Blake, one more answer, please. It was funny. Bonds about to handle business. Rodolfo, let's get Bonds and Blake on the panel. Yeah, we had to get you on here. I don't come to stream about a fighter just to slag him off, but that's me. Oh, that's funny. No way, Rodolfo. I give him props for turning the sport around in 1920. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Jack Dempsey became one of the most popular boxers ever, responsible for the first $1 million gate and the first $2 million gate by virtue of his fights with George Carpentier and, of course, Gene Tunney. And hey, those are some big time fights. It's still crazy seeing that Dempsey Carpentier overhead shot. I think that was Bowles 30 acres in New Jersey. Man, just the amount of people there is just insane. Just kind of see that wide shot is just insane. 1885 to 1926 is the golden age and greatest fighters. Certainly, there were a lot of great fighters during that period right there, Dan. Yeah, I know we've had different golden ages or what people consider to be golden ages at varying times, but certainly that is one of the good periods right there. I'd include the 30s. Yeah, 30s deservedly in there right there. You're right, flat boxing. I mean, you had the likes of Joe Louis and all that stuff. 40s and 50s. I mean, you got to throw all of them in there. Really, it's hard to count anything out. I think about the great Henry Armstrong and what he was able to do and all that stuff. Certainly, you have some good spots and points in varying eras, I guess you can say. Poland ball, what I missed, the Grab Dixie ducking debate of so shade. Yeah, you missed all that Poland ball. It went on for a good bit, it somehow dove into that. We were just going in on it, but that's all I got to say about that. Blake Gallimore, salute to you, Blake. Appreciate you, buddy. Hey, it's all good. Yeah, right. Poland, you just missed it. Yeah, we were talking Dempsey Dempsey grab, man. It just turned into a Dempsey grab type situation. But it was good to go though. It was fun. Shout out to reading your graphics. That is funny. Hey, 86, if you're down to chat, I'm up for it. Hey, you let me know. Let me know what's up. Hey, if we got people down to still listen, hey, I'm down for it. I'm down for Poland ball. I'm gonna let me drop you the little thing. Anybody who wants to jump in the mix. Let me. I'm trying to catch up on this thing. I'm gonna drop it in there, Poland ball. Let me see. I don't like Blake. Blake in timeout. The list out. Hey, y'all trip. Y'all trip. President Fillmore from Cleveland, NYC update. Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, Tommy Ryan, Britton, Basilio, the upstate onion farmer. We talked about him. Certainly, Basilio legit. Did I drop that in there? Blake, you get. Oh yeah, I did. I did drop that in there. You want to hop in there? Hop on there. Hey, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I've got to pause for a second. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. And we're gonna get Fight Fan in here. So I just sent you the link down there. Fight Fan, jump in the mix. Give me 1 second. All right. What's going on with your fight fan, aka Poland Ball? What's good?
Not much, just chilling. Just came back from school. Long day, got a lot of work. Got some work this weekend. Busy schedule. You?
Hey, I'm good to go. Hanging in there. Can't complain. All that good stuff. So just wanted to talk a little boxing history.
Seems like there was a pretty heated debate earlier. I missed it. What?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yeah, a lot of Greb and Dempsey talk right there. That's what it ended up boiling down to, a discussion on what Greb and Dempsey were able to, or at least the fight that potentially could have happened that
Yeah, every
didn't
time you
happen.
mention grab, it's just a flame war.
It certainly is. Real quick, shout out to Scrapbook Boxing in the building. Says peace to you, 86 Boxing. Salute to you, Scrapbook Boxing. Hey, if you want to learn about the history of the sport, go check out Scrapbook Boxing without a doubt. I'm on here learning about the history, all that good stuff. But I learned about the history myself also from the likes of Scrapbook Boxing. Check him out. He's got a ton of content out there. He knows the history like the back of his head, and he can rattle off all these things like dates, time frames, all that. And he's had conversations with a lot of these great boxers of the past who have since left us, for instance, Charlie Burley, all that good stuff. So Scrapbook
Wow.
Boxing is someone you have to check out. He's had conversations with these greats.
I'd love to talk to Charlie Burley.
I
It'd be
know it's insane to think about it, right? Scrapbook Boxing. Hey, he's one of those guys who's been in the mix there. Salute to your scrapbook. So I always tell everyone, go check him out without a doubt. Let's see. But yeah, so yeah, good to have you in here, Poland Ball. Salute scrapbook, all that good stuff. But yeah, we're well, this started out as a discussion between, or at least on Nonpareil Jack Dempsey and the great Manasseh Mauler Jack Dempsey. We're
like
just,
who's greater?
well, not necessarily who's greater, just kind of discussing both. Both are, greats in the sport for varying reasons. You can make an argument for one being greater. For instance, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, of course, considered one of the greatest of his time, considered unrivaled, unbeatable at that particular time. And
Yeah,
he had a pretty solid resume and was able to do a lot of things in the middleweight division, even though he would fight under middleweight. So you could rate him higher. There's an argument for him to be rated higher. And then, of course, we know what Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler, was able to do in the sport as well. One of the biggest mega stars that the sport has seen. So his name rings bells without a doubt. And he overshadows Nonpareil Jack Dempsey for sure.
fortunately, yeah, because it's funny because Nonpareil Jack Dempsey was like the second most famous fighter of his era behind John L. Sullivan.
Yep.
And being number two behind John L. is pretty impressive considering how polarizing of a figure he was. So the fact that he was even as famous as him, like I'm sure if Nonpareil Jack Dempsey lived for a few more years, we'd probably have him on film somewhere, probably have
Yeah.
an exhibition somewhere.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's something I was bringing up. Yeah, it was just unfortunate timing in that sense. So we didn't get the opportunity to actually see him on film. We have pictures, of course, and we have accounts of his fight. Uh, and the writers of the time, they did a great job of accounting for a number of these fights that we are able to recollect as far as the history is concerned. And we have a number of good things about Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. I know he has a book or two out there for sure. I know one for sure, but I feel like there might have been two of them, or at least two noteworthy books that were written on him. Now, I haven't read either of them, but I know I've been meaning to get one in particular. And I did a video on Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. It was earlier when I was making videos, right? But the intent behind it was to kind of just highlight his career in some sense and compare it to where I'm at now in terms of the videos that I make. Yeah, it was more limited. I think it was probably around 6 minutes or something of that nature.
Your
So it
old
didn't really
videos had
tell
like,
everything.
sorry,
Yeah, yeah. So it didn't really tell everything. But man, he was a guy who was certainly one of the greats of his times and had one of he had solid run, a scientific boxer, one who stylistically and skill wise could stand the test of time. So when you're thinking about great fights from their era, he ranks amongst the best. And like you said, he was one of the most popular boxers of the era as well, right there behind Sullivan. That's something I mentioned as well. So I know you're on your game there, fight fan.
Yeah, you already know. But yeah, I think if you compare their legacies, I mean, Jack Dempsey, like the Manasseh Mauler, like the 20s version of Dempsey, seems like his resume is slightly less I think, I don't know if I'm in the minority here of finding Dempsey slightly overrated, because he seems like his legacy has been more influential for boxing than the man himself, because his career has been slightly, like, compared to how much he's been marketed, it's been kind of overrated a bit, overhyped. Because let's see his resume, like his best wins. What would you call Jack Dempsey's best win? I think it's like Gibbons, maybe.
Yeah, maybe Tommy Gibbons. I think Fred Fulton at the time is certainly one of his best wins, because Fred Fulton was on a hell of a run at that particular time. And
Adam Levinsky too was pretty good.
Oh yeah, Levinsky, more so like heavyweight fame, I guess you can say. So that's one thing to factor in. Of course, same with Carpentier, who was a light heavyweight. Luis Andre Firpo, he was a big puncher from that period. So
that's a good win.
That's a good win that goes on his resume right there. So I think those factor in. If you think about his heavyweight run, I think you do have to factor in some of those light heavyweights who moved up as a part of its like best wins, you know.
If he'd be like Harry Wills, I'd rate him a lot higher.
Yeah, the same thing I was saying there. And, you know, I've done a video on Harry Wills, and I was saying here a little bit earlier that I feel like the period between probably 1918 through 1922, the version of Harry Wills in his prime at that particular point, I feel like he was the best heavyweight in the world that time, even over Dempsey. And I think there were few in history would have been able to rival that version of Harry Wills. He was just peaking, and he was just an unstoppable force at that time. Even the great Sam Langford could no longer beat him, and he was running through guys left and right, and he had the resume to back it, you know.
Did you know that Joe Louis actually sparred Harry Wills at the end of the 1940s, and he even told Wills that he's happy he never faced him when he was in his prime?
Oh, no, I didn't know about that. They had a spar. I said, okay, that's pretty dope.
Yeah, so it just goes to show, because a lot of people crap on Wills because they say, "Oh, look him on film. He clinches all the time." But if you watch, there's one fight he has. It's 1 round long, but it shows that he does like the shoulder roll. He's fast, moves his head a bit. So the dude obviously wasn't as primitive. He wasn't some brawler who just went there and just like threw everything out of the book, just fucking went to fight, but didn't actually box. But it seems like Harry Wills was more of a technical boxer than we think he was. I mean, you know, in order to beat Langford, he has to be.
Yeah, without a doubt. You know, we have, of course, limited video on him, and then some of the video we have on him is, of course, him losing to Uz Kadoon, and then I can't remember if there's a little bit of the Jack Sharkey. I remember seeing a little bit of I can't remember if there was a Jack Sharkey video or anything, but a little bit of Bartley Madden, or it might not have been actually, but I know the Firpo video for sure. But Bartley Madden is a guy that he faced, because I was mentioning earlier, he had to go through this little tournament to get a shot at Dempsey, which would have materialized in what would be that 1922 fight. But yeah, he was more technical than what some may know. He could work from the outside and inside. Had a pretty good stiff and solid jab, but the inside game he was good at, even being one of the bigger heavyweights. Just thinking about what he was able to do, and you can see in the little limited little sort of highlight reel or promo video where he's doing this little mock sparring or showing off his uppercut. That's what he would do on the inside there, and I know he took many of guys out on the inside with that uppercut. So he was a very good technical boxer as well.
Yeah, I think I rate him above quite a few heavyweights, surprisingly. Like Patterson, I think I'd rate him above Floyd Patterson.
Oh yeah,
Maybe Liston. I'm not sure where I'd put him on like a heavyweight all-time list, like top 15, maybe top 10. Maybe he could sneak there.
yeah, I have him top 10 for sure. I think he man, the only thing he was missing was the world heavyweight title shot, and I do think if he would have gotten the shot at that particular point, like I said, against whomever would have been the champion, I think he would have been victorious.
I
During
think
that
Dempsey
period.
would have been a very interesting fight. Very
So
interesting.
yeah,
I'm not sure who I'd pick.
yeah, without a doubt. But yeah, it just would have, it just would have been Harry Wells, one of those guys who, he goes a bit underrated. He doesn't get mentioned as much, but one of the great ones in history there who kind of got lost along the trail at times. But certainly, you just look at his resume; he has everything to back it, and yeah, props to him for sure. Real quick, Dan says Fitzsimmons brutalized heavyweights. Jeffries was one of the greatest. No other human could take the beating Fitzsimmons put on Jeffries, broke his jaw, cheekbone, nose, but
That's true.
great.
That's
Yeah,
true.
it is.
There's
Yeah,
I've read a description of the first round of their rematch between Fitzsimmons and Jeffries, and I believe it was Nat Fletcher who said it was a worse beating than Dempsey versus Willard won. Like
wow,
the
that's
first round.
crazy.
He said it was a worse beating than that, and that's surprising. That has to be a really bad. That has to be the ass whipping of the century if it's worse than the Willard fight.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's it's crazy to think about. But I had heard and read, that Fitzsimmons was really giving it to Jeffries, who was one of these guys who was tough, strong, and had endurance and could really hang in there. And of course, Fitzsimmons, we know he's not a big guy, or he wasn't a big guy, so he's a fairly slender guy, but he could punch at everything. But eventually, that endurance of Jeffries and his ability to take damage kind of led him through, and he was able to get Fitzsimmons out of there. Same with Corbett, I believe, what I recall as well. Corbett was having his moments against Jeffries, but of course, ultimately, it came down to just that size and strength of Jeffries at the time, who was really a force. Just given the combination, he could go deep into fights. He had that endurance, so he would be a problem, or at least pose a problem for many just heavyweights fighting under those circumstances in history, for sure.
I wonder how Jeffries versus Dempsey would have gone. That'd be a very interesting fight, like stylistically, because Jeffries could take any beating. He's a human punching bag in some fights, it seems.
Yeah.
he's like the actual Rocky. He's like Rocky in real life.
Yeah.
He just takes the beating, and he's like, when his opponent's tired, he just knocks them out. But his endurance and stamina would definitely be enough to outlast Dempsey. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think some of it might come down to how long it goes. You'd have to think that going deeper into the fight, it would lean towards Jeffries for sure. If I think about, I really like, of course, Dempsey. One of the things that got me into the history was seeing what he was able to do against Jess Willard. So just seeing that version of him, that determined, hungry, young version of Dempsey just coming out gunning on offense, that could pose problems for Jeffries, certainly. So you could see him potentially landing some stuff to really damage him. But I would certainly think that as time went on, the longer the fight went, then that would certainly play more into the favor of Jeffries, who was accustomed to such. And we know Tom Sharkey was a big puncher for the time. It wasn't a tall guy, but he was a stocky, big punching, tough
Joe Chowinski
guy
too.
for sure. Yeah, who was that? Was that
Joe Chowinski as well fought Jeffries, and he was a hard puncher.
Yeah, Joe Chowinski. Very underrated fighter there. I think he would have been light heavyweight champion had he gotten an opportunity at the light heavyweight title, or at least it was around during probably when he was at his peak or whatever. We know he knocked out Jack Johnson. Yeah, and realistically, he was 170 something pounds, but he had that type of punch that could carry across the board, whether he was fighting at heavyweight, light heavyweight, etc. I mean, Joe Chowinski, and he was a very good technical boxer. So I got a lot of respects for the Cali Terra there, Joe Trowinski. Definitely a good fighter for sure. And we have that video of him, which is pretty crazy, as Jeffries was training for that Jack Johnson fight. You could see him there sparring, training with
I
Joe
love that
Trowinski.
footage. It's like I kind of think it's an example of how underrated technique was back then. Because if you watch that footage, Joe Trowinski has some beautiful footwork.
Yes, he does.
Traps Jeffries in the corner without throwing a punch, only using his feet.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, that's big time. Yeah, and this is Joe. I don't know how old he was at that time. I'm assuming he may have been in his 40s or something like that, because I know I think he only fought for probably about 9 years or somewhere in that range. So he had a decent number of fights, but certainly he probably could have kept going, just thinking about the times and everything. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he was still in pretty solid form at that particular time. And yeah, I think that's a good video, or at least a piece of video that kind of just shows you, just what the man would have been during his time. But yeah, Joe Trowinski, mad respect for him. Very underrated fighter there.
All-time great. He fought Corbett too, I believe. He fought pretty much everyone. Like he's not someone that you can call like a ducker, like Jeffries or Sullivan.
Yeah, that is right. Yeah, he fought anyone. He took on all comers. So yeah, Trowinski was in there with some big time names. And one of those fearless guys who, rose up the ranks in terms of, size didn't really matter to him, but definitely one of the greats who's from that time. So yeah, that era just had a lot of good guys, and that's what I always say, and I've said it in this broadcast or whatever, that when we think about scientific boxers and all of that stuff, it didn't start with James J. Corbett, even though he gets
credit
as being one of the guys or the guy or whatever. But that being said, there were plenty of guys who were very technical and skilled around at that time.
Oh, so I see a pretty interesting comment here. How would an intelligent fighter like Corbett deal with an animal like McVeigh? Ooh, that's a good question. McVeigh versus Corbett. On paper, McVeigh should win, but Corbett, like in his prime, was pretty defensively like untouchable. He was kind of like, it's weird. He was kind of like a Roy Jones of his time, because his style was more dependent on athleticism rather than technique. Because Roy Jones would do the craziest stuff, but it wasn't very technical. He would just be so fast and athletic that you can't just hit him back. And that's what Corbett kind of was as well. He was just too fast and too athletic to be hit back. So it's either that McVeigh would knock him out, which is possible. I mean, but McVeigh isn't really a knock. It's hard to say because he's been outclassed by smaller fighters many times, like Langford. Langford had like a 40-pound weight advantage against McVeigh. And Langford even said that McVeigh, when he's reduced to like if you're beating McVeigh and he's reduced to just being like in a losing fight, then he tends to be reduced to only jabbing. That's what Langford said. So if Corbett could find a way to kind of limit McVeigh to a jab, then I think he has it in the bag. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one, to think about. Certainly, I could see ways for both to win. I could see certainly Corbett outpointing McVeigh under certain circumstances. If McVeigh, really, like you said, just kind of fell asleep in there and really wasn't the aggressive version of McVeigh that was probably him at his best, using his power, working his game on the inside. I could certainly see Corbett pulling off a points victory. I could also see McVeigh overpowering him in some sense, at least maybe even if not early through attrition, which could be done as well. And McVeigh had the power to land something that could probably end things early for him. Now, Corbett, I think he has a pretty solid.
If he can catch Corbett, sorry for interrupting. If he could catch Corbett, I think that's
if you could catch him for sure. He was Bob Fitzsimmons in that contest. Corbett was seemingly winning the fight, at least in the early portions of it, and actually dropped Fitzsimmons, and then ultimately he caught that solar plexus punch. So
Yeah, it
you could
looks like
see something like
yeah.
that. You could see something like that happening for sure. I think that yeah, that's a very interesting matchup right there. I see ways for both winning. I'd probably lean towards McVay, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a coin flip
Size
in some
matters.
sense.
Like size matters. Like McVeigh's like 220
Yeah,
pounds.
right.
Corbett like 180. It's it's
Yeah,
it's gonna
some
have an
as
effect.
yeah, some aspects of it are coin flip, but I think McVay and if you look at the resume, yeah, I think McVay he just battled through more in tougher competition just overall when the resume you look at it from the way it's spread out because Corbett he didn't have a ton of fights really. I think sub 20 fights as a matter of fact or maybe around 21 or something in totality. But Corbett did a lot in those fights and he did take on some pretty solid competition. Peter
Yeah.
Jackson, of course, being probably the best guy he faced outside of John L. Sullivan.
Yeah, but it was
So
an old Sullivan, so we can't really call him the best Sullivan.
that is true. So, but yeah, I think that certainly them peaking at their peak, I had to lean McVay just given, I think that
Size.
size and power would be a factor for sure. He probably wouldn't be as good technically, but I think he could make up for that with what he's able to do power wise and he could go the distance as well. I mean, you think about that fight in Paris between him and uh, Joe Jeanette, that third fight between the two. I mean, arguably the
Yeah, that's
greatest fight of
insane.
all time. 40 something rounds. I can't remember how many off top here, but it was just crazy. So he can battle through attrition and so yeah, I would have to lean McVay, no doubt.
How would you see a fight between Sullivan and McVeigh going?
That'd be a very interesting one as well. I think both would have their moments. I think they match up size wise. Sullivan, he was a very solid guy at probably about 5'10" and a half, 5'11", generally same weight, same height for the most part as McVay. Now, of course, McVay had fought the better competition. I'd imagine Sullivan's best chance is kind of going out blasting. And yeah, he's capable of catching McVay. I would say that's probably his best bet.
I don't think
Certainly,
McVeigh has the sorry. I don't think he has the skill to really deal with Sullivan because
yeah,
in order to deal with Sullivan, you have to know how to move. You have to know how to kind of have some footwork, have some defense, but McVeigh had none of that.
yeah, yeah, right. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would lean McVay in that as well because I just think it boils down to because yeah, in dissecting Sullivan's resume, of course, yeah, he did a lot, and there are a ton of fights that weren't reported. But just thinking about his official fights, and not factoring in sort of those 4 rounders he was doing on his tour and all that stuff. But he was fighting a lot of guys who didn't really have a career in boxing. They may have had 1 or 2 fights or whatever. He was
Yeah,
fighting a lot
true.
of guys who were making their debut, but he did have some competitors who were good in when you just factored in terms of the times and what they were able to
Well,
do at
there's
heavyweight.
there's
Dominic
Tim Corine.
McCaffrey,
That's
Charlie
about
Mitchell, those type guys. But certainly McVay was more battle tested, so I think McVay had more to him in that sense for sure.
I just wish we could have footage of Sullivan so we could rate him better because he's more myth than man at this point. Like
Yeah,
Sullivan's legacy, even though it's kind of overshadowed nowadays by Peter Jackson, it's still you can argue him as like a top 20 heavyweight
yeah,
technically. Like he still dominated his era and there probably would have been like a few fighters that he faced who would have become world contenders, but he just stopped that from happening by knocking them the fuck out.
yeah, yeah, right. No, I think he definitely rates amongst those greats for sure. I think he would have beat Old Chocolate George Godfrey had they fought. I think his size would have been more of a factor. In one of the latest videos that I did, I was kind of comparing some of those fights that didn't happen. He would have beat probably Frank Slavin which is a very good Australian heavyweight. I think Peter Jackson would have beat him, and
Peter
he had
Jackson.
an opportunity to fight C.C. Smith back in the day early on, who was the first colored heavyweight champion. And I think he had a good chance of potentially beating C.C. Smith as well. So there were just some fights we didn't get to see from him that, of course, takes away from, that in-ring sort of legend of John L. Sullivan. But by that same token, he did have some other good names that he did take on.
Yeah, he had his resume isn't horrible. It could have been like so much better, but it's just that boxing began to kind of take off as he was getting old. So by the
Yeah,
time Peter Jackson and Frank Slavin, all these guys came, John L's peak was in the early 1880s. So by the mid 1880s, the late 1880s, he gets this alcohol poisoning and he loses like 100 pounds.
oh
Have you
yeah,
heard about that for his fight with Kilrain? He was almost dead in his bed
yeah,
from a cold, and then he had to recover from that and a broken arm. And
yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah. Yeah, he had went through some issues. Yeah, he was definitely on the rough end, the rough side as far as alcoholism, and yeah, I know it took a miracle in some sense for him to overcome that and then go through the training in that fight with Kilrain. He had William Muldoon, famous wrestler, of course. But yeah, I've I have the John L. Sullivan book. Christopher Klein did a great job with that, and they
I think I
speak
have
on
that
that.
same book actually.
Was that?
I think I might have that same book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, Sullivan, yeah, he went through it at that time. So I do think that the version of James Corbett that beat Sullivan in 1892 certainly wasn't the best version of Sullivan, and I think it would have been a different story had it been a few years prior, But Sullivan, yeah, his out of the ring behavior, I think, kind of overshadowed the latter part of his career in some sense.
Oh wow, there's a pretty good matchup here as well. Another one from Flack Boxing, Archie Moore
What?
versus Sam Langford.
Oh yeah, one of my
Yeah,
all-time. Oh yeah, Archie Moore, the great old mongoose versus Sam. Like that'd be a good fight right there, man. Archie Moore, top 10 boxer all time, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he could do it all. And you have accounts of those who knew of him and worked with him, fought him, etc., who view him as the greatest fighter ever. I think that would have been a very good fight. Uh, Certainly at light heavyweight, you might go. I mean, yeah, Archie could pull it off. I think he had the ability. I think in a series of fights they'd exchange wins. Uh, Maybe even a heavyweight as well. I mean,
did he have the chin though to deal with Sam's level of power? Because he couldn't
that'd
deal
be a big
with
question.
Rocky's level of power, and I think that Langford's a better puncher than Marciano personally. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. That would be the big piece of it. Withstanding that sort of power, that punch power that Sam Langford does have. Now we know that Archie Moore does have a chin. We saw him get up from Yvonne Durrell. Looked like it was done. He was able to get up and withstand that. We've
true.
seen him in a number of other fights, but yeah, at heavyweight, of course, yeah, Rocky took him out. So yeah, it would be very interesting. Sam Langford, he had the type of power that was legit and it carried above the weights. But yeah, I think
Or
he could pull off a win in some sense in a series of fights, like I said. But certainly Langford would be tough sledding for Archie Moore, without a doubt.
yeah, it'd be an insane fight. I don't know who I'd pick.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough right there. Both of them, man, all time greats right there for sure. And you can make a case for each, but certainly, yeah, Langford. I mean, yeah, just the way he was able to carry that power up in weight, and just think
I'd
about the
favor him.
toughness tied to him. He could work his way in there to land on Archie, so it will be interesting, very much interesting for sure. That's a very good one.
Oh, there's another one here. Wow, everyone has these matchups. Dempsey versus Holyfield at cruiserweight.
And Dempsey versus, oh yeah, Oh yeah, Butcher. What's going on, Butcher? Salute to you, Butcher. I know you dropped that. I told you. I think that yeah, I'd favor Holyfield in that
Same.
contest.
I'd favor Holyfield. I think he's too tough and too good.
Yeah, very rugged. Holyfield, man, he could dish it out and take it. So I favor him in a cruiserweight matchup without a doubt. Probably heavyweight as well. Just thinking about, or at least comparing the both of them. But yeah, Holyfield, man, he was the truth. I mean, he could box. He was one of the toughest heavyweights ever. He could put his punches together well. I mean, just a good mix of speed, power, all that good stuff. So
He
yeah, I
would
think
know he was in a fight though. That's for sure.
yeah,
It'd be a
yeah.
crazy fight. Another matchup with Holyfield I found interesting was Jack Sharkey versus Holyfield. I think that'd be a pretty cool matchup for some reason.
Yeah,
Like
it'd be interesting.
peak Sharkey, if you just look at him, there's this one fight where he just has these Muhammad Ali level reflexes, and it's weird. I think it's his fight with Jim Delaney. I think that's his name. It's
Okay, Jim Delaney. Okay, yeah, yeah. He was a good light heavyweight.
yeah.
Yeah. No, Jack Sharkey, yeah, he was solid. He have some on and off matchups, or at least on and off performances. I would favor Holyfield in that fight as well. But certainly Jack Sharkey, when he's on his game, yeah, he could put together some fairly solid performances. But certainly, it depends on what version of Jack showed up because he can be
Yeah,
thrown off his game for sure.
easily.
But he's a good one. He's a very interesting fighter. But hey, he fought in a pretty solid era. So the fact that he was able to do what he was able to do,
Like
uh,
Smalling versus Holyfield. Too. Holyfield is a very interesting person to use matchups with.
yeah, certainly he has that kind of throwback type of career and style to him in totality. So yeah, he is one that you can kind of throw in the mix there, and you think about it. He wasn't uh, the biggest heavyweight, you know what I'm saying? And you could say undersized in some sense since he kind of rose from cruiserweight or whatever. But yeah, he just overall just looked at you look at his body of work, just his measurables and all that stuff. He kind of just stacks up well across any era when you're talking about fantasy matchups. So that
He
would
also
be
has,
interesting.
he also has the help of some supplements, but like that
Oh yeah,
Sharkey and Dempsey didn't have access to.
yeah, that is true. Well, that's good stuff. Andre said this is on the Ring series have a new book. I'm gonna have to check that out, Andre. But yeah, you're right. I know he was on that Balco list. Victor Conti mentioned him. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, Yeah, some of these guys, yeah, they have that tied to them. You can't overlook it for sure. Dan says Jeffries could dish out too. Maybe the toughest and most powerful between him and Foreman. Oh, certainly,
Punching
certainly.
power wise, I'm not sure. I can't think of times where like he's stopped people like Foreman has, but toughness
Yeah,
wise,
no,
definitely.
no. Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, certainly, yeah, not in that same type. With the way Foreman was able to ragdoll some of these guys, but Jeffries, but yeah, he was a very strong guy, and certainly as it went deeper in the fights, with that endurance that he had, he could make some things happen for sure.
Like you think like if he and Foreman fought, do you think Jeffries could stand a chance? I don't really think he would, but I have some confidence that he could take like a beating until the final bell against Foreman. Like George Chuvalo was pretty close to
Yeah,
take a full beating.
but no, I wouldn't favor him over Big George Foreman. Yeah, he's one of my favorite heavyweights in terms of just thinking about his career, especially young George. Yeah, I would favor him over a lot of guys. I rate him very highly. If I'm thinking about making a top 10 list, I rate him high up there, probably higher than most would actually rate him. So, yeah, I'll give him
Really?
the edge over Jeffries. I think it would be a good contest. You get to see two strong guys going at it, but I think eventually the power of George Foreman takes over in similar fashion to what we saw with him with some of the other big guys like Lyle or freaking Ken Norton or whatever.
Be
I
a
just
fun
think
fight.
he can dish it out.
Be a fun. I don't know if Jeffries would take the fight because like the color line and shit.
Not with the title on the line.
Yeah, I think he would dock Foreman like the plague if it was the 1900s.
Yeah, Jeffrey did have a solid resume for one of those, again, shorter careers. He had
Very, yeah.
like 22 or 23 fights somewhere in that neighborhood.
He beat Corbett. He beat Sharkey. He beat.
Oh yeah,
This,
Tom Sharkey a couple of times. Hank Griffin, he was a black heavyweight from the time. He didn't give him a title shot, but he was pretty solid.
he beat Peter Jackson as well.
Yeah, Peter Jackson. Of course, that was his last fight, and Peter was not. That was the kind of
it wasn't an impressive win, but it was like
a
black fighter.
Peter died of tuberculosis a year later, or somewhere around there. So this was not the best version of Peter Jackson at that time. But still, good win, a good name to have on a resume. So Jeffries, he had some good opponents for that short type overall career in fight total.
I would actually argue putting Jeffries above Johnson in like a top a ranking. What would your thoughts be on that?
Some do for sure. I mean, I think an argument can certainly be made for sure. I rate Johnson a little bit higher, just thinking about Johnson's pre-title work, but especially when you talk about the title work, Johnson left a lot to be desired. A lot of guys he could have fought that he didn't fight. He should have fought Sam Lankford, should have fought Joe Jeanette and Sam McVeigh. You name it, others as well. And, of course, some of these guys he fought beforehand, but once he got the title, he was more interested in, I guess the money, and pretty much didn't want any tough competition in that sense. So
it's a shame.
Yeah, I'd imagine the title I don't think he would have held the title that long had he fought the likes of Jeanette or McVeigh at that particular time.
It kind of peaked later on because, like, if we have like an alternate history where Jeffries never retires in 1904, so he keeps going. Who would you? I don't think Jack Johnson would beat a prime Jeffries. That's just my opinion. But other guys like Lankford or McVeigh or Jeanette, it's possible. Like as Jeffries gets older, it's possible that these guys, one of them is going to beat him. It's possible.
Yeah, certainly. And I think like pre-1904, probably 1903, pre-1903, I think Jeffries would have beat Johnson. I think later in the 1910s or that 1900 to 1910 time frame, I think Johnson potentially would have beat Jeffries, with him peaking. But certainly prior to probably 1903 or 1904, I think Jeffries would have beat Johnson because he wasn't very polished. And Jeffries, he started out tough competition. A lot of those guys back then, but really from the jump, Jeffries, he just started out great. And as it relates to just the level of competition he was facing. So I think that would have factored in. Now, certainly, I think if Jeffries would have continued fighting beyond 1904 and eventually ran in, I think if he'd have fought, say, to beyond 1910 for sure, then he would have certainly ran into probably versions of Lankford or Jeanette that I think would have probably beat him at some point had they got the opportunity to fight for the title. But certainly he would have still been a very tough challenge, probably up through that 1910 time frame, because I would say that probably with the likes of Lankford, maybe even McVeigh, they really kind of came to, certainly Lankford came to more in that 1911 time frame, like between 1911 and then going up to like 1915, 16. Sam McVeigh or Sam Lankford was a force at that particular time. So, it would have been tougher for him against Jeffries. Prior to 1910. And Lankford at the time hadn't really grown into a full-fledged heavyweight,
Yeah, I think like by the time 1911 comes, like Jeffries is like 37. So I think Lankford would definitely be in like a prime position to take the title, and even against Johnson in 1911, I'd
Mhm.
favor Langford because this is when Johnson's kind of getting a bit older as well. But
Yeah.
before that, it's harder to pick because Johnson has the perfect style to counter Langford because he's
Yeah.
tall and he grapples a lot. And there's Langford who's small and like wants to not be grappled because he's small. Obviously, against a bigger man, he wouldn't really want to grapple
Mhm.
in a boxing match. But Johnson's just a master of the clinch, as we could see on film. He's
Yeah.
just masterful at it.
Yeah. Is not sort of entertaining to watch in that sense, if you're expecting a back and forth or whatever. But for the time and what he was able to do and what was allowed within the confines of the ring, certainly he had that pretty much mastered. He knew how to nullify one's offense, tie them up, and kind of drag things out and take these guys to deep water and get them out of there. So he was able to do that on a number of occasions. I had put up a poll and I've discussed it. I know with Random Acoustic Thoughts as well, in terms of had Johnson and Langford fought when Langford was more of a heavyweight, or at least had packed on more poundage and all that stuff. It's not a guarantee that Langford would have defeated him. There would have still been, some things he would have had to get past, that defense being one of them. Certainly would have been a very interesting fight, I would say, more so than anything. So it's
Fight that
unfortunate
should
it
have
didn't happen. I know it should have happened. Unfortunate, the money was there and everything. So yeah, Jack Johnson, man, that heavyweight reign left so much to be desired, and he
It's like every
yeah.
heavyweight before Joe Louis was just avoiding everyone.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, we've had a discussion on that as well. Salute to Random. We were thinking about like just when did it really kind of transfer over to where you saw everyone kind of just fighting everyone? Yeah. And it was really in that Joe Louis time frame with the likes of Jack Sharkey, Smelling, and all those guys. Yeah, they were taking on each other and everything. So I think from that point, that's when we got more into where you could steadily see the fights that you wanted to see at heavyweight, or the best heavyweights facing the best heavyweights without all these other particulars just thrown into the mix, because those guys from Dempsey, and he fought a little bit more than the others, but the guys prior to Dempsey as heavyweight champion, they didn't fight much. I mean, Tommy Burns, he was a traveling champion, so he was one who fought a number of fights.
He even fought Jack Johnson.
Yeah,
So
he fought him, so he was a traveling one. But outside of Tommy Burns, yeah, those other guys, when they got it, they barely fought. Even Jeffries, in terms of defending the title, it wasn't too many times. But when Fitzsimmons, he didn't. I can't remember if he lost it in that first defense or what. I think it was. So him and Corbett, similar thing, barely defended it. And Sullivan, he got to the point where he was barely actually defending it himself, and kind of just went downhill. So it wasn't until that Lewis era, or just before that, where we saw them really kind of just defending it more on a regular.
Seems like race had a lot to do with it, because even with Jack Johnson's reign, he was avoiding fighters just because they were black.
Yeah, yeah.
It just seems like before Lewis came, and Lewis made this kind of image by beating Max Schmeling. He's the American hero. He's one of us. So it's like it made like black fighters at heavyweight more like, okay, we can let these guys fight for the title, because Lewis kind of paved the way for blacks to be accepted in boxing. But Johnson kind of made it where it was near impossible for a black fighter to get like a shot, because he was so polarizing. He would smile as his opponents. He would date white women.
He was a very polarizing figure during polarizing times, without a doubt. But yeah, I think that Joe Louis, Max Schmeling, certainly the most significant fight in boxing history as far as I'm concerned. Not too long ago, I was looking at that fight in slow mo, because there's some good versions. Some people have kind of straightened it out. I think Smooth Legends is one who's done it. Man, if you look at it in slow motion, Joe Louis Schmeling 2, man, you can just see the brutality in those punches that Lewis was landing on Schmeling. I
I
mean,
kind of wonder, like, what would like a Schmeling title reign look like if he beat Lewis? Like, how would that go? Like,
yeah, that would have, yeah, been interesting. Different time for sure.
like, would he be defending it in Germany? Would there be like great American hopes, like there were great white hopes?
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's almost like an alternate reality right there. I know they made a show some years back. I remember watching like the first episode of where it was like from the perspective of had Germany won World War II or whatever. But certainly, I'd imagine had Smelling won the title, yeah, there would have been a lot of propaganda and stuff tied to it. And who knows? I know the intent was to prevent him from getting to Germany, but say he took it over there, man, it would have been interesting. I can only imagine how that title would have been defended, not necessarily by Smelling's choice, but more so just by the control of the Hitler regime at that time.
You think that Hitler's regime would dictate who he would fight like
Yeah, I feel
against?
like they would have. Yeah, I feel like they would have dictated the fight game from there,
Like
and
Axis only opponents?
yeah, I feel like that probably would have happened for sure. Yeah, I don't think I don't think they would have wanted to relinquish the power that would have come with the title had Smelling beat Lewis that second time, because that would have given them sort of a definitive claim as far as we have the greatest boxers in the world, we have the
We're the
greatest
best
heavyweight in the
race,
world.
I guess, now because we beat
So that would have been very interesting. That would have been very interesting right there. Just thinking about that scenario going the other way.
It'd be a weird moment for boxing history, like kind of like a dark age, because like would anyone
Yeah.
watch the sport anymore? Like if Schmeling defended his title in the U.S., how would that even go? Like would people even would he be booed? Would he be like what would even happen?
See, I feel like if he would have got it at that particular time and gone back over there, I feel like he wouldn't have defended it in the U.S. anymore.
It makes sense for him. I mean, Schmeling was never a Nazi, but like you can't really
Yeah,
blame him for wanting to sort of collaborate and like kind of appease Hitler, because he had no other choice as one of the
yeah.
most famous German athletes in the world. It's not like he could say no.
I feel like it wouldn't have necessarily been by his choice. I feel like it would have been a culmination of just everything that was going on. The only thing that would have, of course, changed the course was, what happened. Of course, them losing the ultimate battle in war overall. I guess you can say, and
Yeah,
maybe that would have freed up the title in some sense. But certainly, while if Smelling would have won it with them still kind of having that status that they had, yeah, that would have been a very different look for the sport of boxing, especially as the heavyweights are concerned in the heavyweight history. Indeed. Now, Smelling, I agree. I think it was a very, very good fighter. One of the best of that era, without a doubt,
I
and
mean he's
stylistically stands the
best
test of
before
time.
Lewis, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. He took out Joe Louis in legitimate fashion right there. Uh, and I think that Smelling, stylistic. I like Smelling's style. I think it sort of translates. Uh, we have these varying boxers from different areas. Their style just translates across the board. Smelling is one of those guys, as far as I'm concerned. Very good boxer. Tough
Yeah, great
competition,
defense.
nice style. So yeah, I think he would, do his thing in any era, at least be a contender in that sense.
I
So
agree.
very good boxer. Last message about IT Ring Series. Andre Rodriguez says the author is known for some of you guys, I'm sure. Adam J. Pollock. Oh yeah, I've heard of him. He wrote Bob Fitzsimmons, James J. Corbett, James Jeffrey, and Jack Johnson, etc. All right, good stuff, Andre. You're gonna have to check that out without a doubt. I know you had mentioned that. Good stuff. Oh yeah. You've been typing it out there. Poland Ball, got you. Springs Toledo. Yeah, I know he has a book on Greb, right? Smokestack Lightning or something like that. I've been saying I want to check that out. Toledo was there quite recently. Public not recently. Okay, good stuff. Butcher of Texas. Butcher of North Texas. Appreciate you. Holyfield, an all-time great at heavyweight, cruiser, and light heavy. Yeah, Holyfield, man.
Heavy, really? I didn't know that.
He's really a throwback fighter, you know. And just thinking about his career in totality, he's really very much a throwback fighter as far as just the amount of fights that he had relative to kind of what we're accustomed to in this era, and just that willingness to just take on any and all comers for sure. He was certainly one of those guys. You know, he would step in there with anyone for the most part. So he had that throwback type mentality to him without a doubt. Butcher of Texas, Big George versus Jeffries. Stamina is the key, and Jeffries could go 20 plus rounds. That is true.
But can he handle it for 20 plus rounds?
Yeah, that's a big point too.
Morgan is like arguably the biggest puncher ever.
Yeah, I'm leaning my guy Big George, but certainly if we're talking 20 plus rounds, then yeah, that's gonna play into Jeffrey's favor. But I feel like Holyfield would get him out of there. I feel like he would beforehand, you know. But it's very interesting. It's always interesting thinking about the eras in some of the boxers and everything, and how they compare. Of course, with this one, this is a pretty tough one. We're thinking Holyfield and Jeffries, just the time in between. Not as tough as like a boxer of today or whatever, but certainly some things are translatable, but definitely you have to look into the conditions and things of that nature as well when comparing some of these guys. But yeah, it's all good. I love going through the process of having these discussions and just kind of getting thought and insight on things. That's what keeps the sport of boxing invigorating. And, you know, and you can do more of these types of discussions, I feel, by comparison to some of the other sports. Because while, of course, boxing back in the day was different, it's just some of those parallels and nuances in comparison to other sports, and kind of the gap and divide between the two, I think is wide. You know, I think if you think about those guys in history and the guys today, of course, in my opinion, and some may think otherwise, but I don't think the gap is as wide as some make it out to be, especially with certain fighters, you know.
Totally.
So cool stuff. Dan says his Foreman is the greatest heavyweight ever. Then Ali, Lewis, Marciano, Dempsey, 70s Foreman. Yeah, 70s Foreman was a beast without a doubt. I hold my man Muhammad Ali in high regard. Yes, it's pretty crazy. Flack says I like how close in stats Alu and Lewis are. Yeah, those are my top two heavyweights right there. I rate Muhammad Ali 1, but if someone has Joe Lewis 1, I'm fine with that. Can't argue against such. Both were able to do great things. Both have their own unique styles to them. And, I mean, you can make an argument for either one. But certainly, I rate my guy Muhammad Ali there. But I love Joe Lewis as well, you know.
I rate Ali above Lewis as well, personally. I think his resume is much better.
Yeah. Flat Boxing says Ali beat 2 more individual champs. Lewis beat 1 more individual Hall of Famer. Ali beat 1 more pound-for-pound rated fighter. Lewis had 4 more title defenses. Oh, yeah, that title defense reign for Lewis, yeah. Seems like that's one that it's going to be tough to catch up with that right there. It's been able to stand. Vladimir Klitschko had the opportunity. Getting pretty close, so pretty crazy. Flat Boxing, I like how close the debate is. Yeah, that's probably one of the closest ones, especially when you think about fantasy matchups. That one right there is probably the top tier version, just thinking about how the two of them match up. Certainly it is the one. It may be the one for sure. So, but yeah, cool. Good stuff, man. So what we've hit that 3-hour mark. It's crazy. Boxing can take you deep into discussion. You know what I'm saying?
It's a fun story.
You know, when I got on, I was thinking I'm going 1 hour. You know, I was thinking I was going 1 hour, but look at here now. We're here in that 3 hour mark, so we're gonna have to uh, cut this thing short right here, man. So
Wow.
Fight fan. Hey, yeah, drop that link in the chat. Definitely Fight fan. You know, I checked out that video. I like the video. I'm gonna check out more of the
Me too.
opponent's Greb's fault. You know.
Oh wow, thanks. Yeah, I've been thinking of making a second one for that because it got so many views.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never gotten 1,000 views before, let alone 2,000.
Good stuff.
New experience.
Oh yeah, no, good stuff. Yeah, I'll share some tips and information that will help you out for sure.
Thanks, brother.
But yeah, no, that's a good video right there because Greb, he's an enigma in the sport in some sense. And some people, they don't know about him. They know the name. They feel varying types of ways about him. But hey,
Yeah, he's a very controversial figure, that's for sure. Because
very
there's
controversial.
no footage. There's like so much. Because he has the best resume ever, but he's also has zero footage to his name.
But it's a good thing that we have footage of the opponents that he beat, so that we can look at and say, "Wow, he must have been a hell of a fighter to be able to take out these guys." Right?
Totally, yeah.
That's the way you got to look at it, without a doubt. So yeah, he's certainly one of those guys. But maybe something pops up one of these days. Knocking on wood, not getting my hopes up too high, but you never know. You never freaking know. But definitely check out Fight Fan. The link is there in the chat. If you saw the last video as well, go through that. Check out Fight Fan. Give him a follow, of course. Hey, appreciate having you on, Fight Fan. We're going to have to do this again at some point. Appreciate everyone who dropped by, too.
Sorry?
Yeah, I was just saying, appreciate everyone who dropped by as well. But yeah, Fight Fan, yeah, we're going to have to do something else. But yeah, I'll be definitely in contact. Plenty more discussions to come, for sure.
Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Salute to you all.